hope everyone enjoyed the lunch. I thought it was pretty good. I ate too much. The dean of our College of Science and Engineering is my dean. Is a sponsor for the luncheon. She's taking care of that, so we get to enjoy a good meal while we're here. And that costs us anything. Appreciate Dr. Andrea Graham for her continued generosity. Let me see, while we're all gathered up, I'll mention a couple of things. I want to acknowledge the sponsors that we have for the symposium. Without them, we wouldn't be able to function. Gold Spike sponsor, Stephen and Mary Amaro. Where they're at, they're here. So we really appreciate what they've done over the years. They've been on the program, they've been the community, heard them speak, and they continue to support the symposium every year. They're good folks. You can tell how good-hearted they are. If they see the baby birds stranded on the sidewalk somewhere, they're going to pick it up and take care of it, as you've seen every day. Harry Nichols, the Bronze Spike sponsor. Appreciate that very much. Iron Spike sponsor, Glenn Williams, that's set up over here. Been a long time supporter of the symposium, and been coming for years and done programs and all. So we appreciate him. And Tina Zevin, probably slaughtering her name there. She's a sporting sponsor as well, and she's representing the College Public Library. She's the local history librarian, and she's kind of the keeper of the railroad collection down there. So, if not, she's got a table sitting up there at 537. You can't miss it. One other thing I want to mention. Seems like we get. I'm glad to see new names and new faces here, because otherwise we would just keep shrinking every year. It's always sad when we lose some of our friends. So this year, we decided to do a dedication symposium with Mr. Thomas Bailey. Many of you knew Tom. He's been coming for years. You know, if you look across the room, he's the one that stands about this much taller than everybody else. Myron's got to pick up the slack now. We lost him back in March. He was a member of with the East Texas Mall Railroad Club, who has a layout here in Commerce. He's been a long-time supporter of the symposium. If you've been to your luncheons and we're doing music, you most likely saw him in the band, being part of another band, or leading the band on some occasions. That just kind of came up all of a sudden. We were looking forward to having him here this year, and that didn't happen. So we decided to dedicate this year's symposium to his memory. Appreciate the time we have with you. For the next presentation, we're going to have some handouts. We're going to pass them online here, make sure everybody gets one. And I'll start the presentation. I was contacted by this gentleman, and so we kind of put in touch with each other. Ed kind of made mention of him and said, "Hey, here's a guy that knows a lot of stuff, and has the background to support that. He's been director of several museums, been leading quite a few restoration efforts and preserving history, and the Arkansas Road Museum in Pine Bluff is now lucky enough to kind of have him on board and taking care of some things up there and leading some projects. I think they've got a good hand up there now, and they're all thankful for the work he's doing and bringing his expertise to bear at that facility and half of the old cotton belt. So we're pleased with that. So we've got a few programs left to get done this afternoon, so we'll try not to talk too much. I'll hand over now to Randy Heath from Little Rock, and he's going to talk about the mining divisions.
Well, I'm not really a cotton belt guy until about 6-8 months ago. I'm a Westerner. I know a great deal about SP, and I know a great deal about the railroads, UP, and the railroads of the West, but I moved to Little Rock 3 years ago. And I've been learning about it, and I now have become associated with the Arkansas Railroad Museum. And this is going to be a story of an artifact and how you can track it down. So, last fall, he gave us this caboose. This is a cotton belt local caboose. It's not a drover's caboose. Okay? This is truly a passenger accommodation. He had acquired it out of a dead line in Rayburn, Arkansas. He had it on his tiny little short line with a couple of alcoves. And this is where it came from. Seen in 1971. These cars have been pushed out on the side. Apparently, maybe we're coming to Texas to a gentleman in Houston that never got delivered. So he saved one went to the Arkansas Railroad Museum. We think the rest got scrapped. So here's the caboose, beautifully painted. Unfortunately, a year ago, it looked like the picture, the lower picture. It's a wooden car. It has a steel roof, so the water hasn't come inside, but it was starting to fall apart. And Peter gave it to our museum. We pulled the cupola off to enable us to move it. It went onto a trailer. Bearings had been stolen. We made wooden bearings to allow us to move it around without damaging it. It arrived at the site. We have put the cupola back on. We started stripping siding off of one side of the car to see how bad was. It's not real bad. The donation did come with siding, so we'll be residing the car. Not a lot of repair to the frame. So I come from a background where before we would do significant work on an artifact, we created a preservation report, sometimes called a restoration report, to guide the work. So what is this thing that we're working with? What is its condition? What are our plans? What are our options for plans to restore it, to guide the work? And the museum welcomed that process, and I started looking at the artifact, and I started trying to research it. So it turns out there's 4 that survived. One at Ashtown, Arkansas. Whole lot of windows on that one. It had been on the ground. Its underframe is gone, so it's been put up on some trucks to do a display. Another long one, the Austin Steam Train Association. They got it after it had gone to New England. Been on a couple of tourist railroads up there. Car's basically complete, but its interior has been lost. The seating and the stoves have been lost. At Frisco, Texas, not that far from here, they have one. I don't really know, other than it's complete overtly from exterior. And then our car, and there are rumors of at least a couple more bodies in the woods at a duck camp in Arkansas and maybe one in Texas. I may know about the duck, but there's one in the duck camp that may still be there. So I started looking at cotton belt caboose history, and I started thinking about how to organize it, because there isn't a lot out there. So there's early history, really starting in 1891, really with the formation of the St. Louis Southwestern of Texas, includes narrow gauge cars, includes Kansas and Gulf. There's this freight cabooses versus local cabooses, and the railroad seems to use the word local cabooses, but they also call them coach/caboose in record keeping. Some people call them Arkansas cabooses, although it looks like they were used in Texas as much as Arkansas. There's wood cars versus steel cars. If you look at the Cotton Belt held on to wood cars much later than most railroads. They didn't buy a steel car until 1957, 58. Up until then, they were wood cars. Well, railroads, UP thought they were late to steel cars they were buying in 1940. So very late to go to steel. And then if it's a wood car, is it on a steel underframe? And if it was a wood car with truss rods and they put a steel underframe under it, it now becomes considered a steel car. It was the underframe that the railroad was worried about. And then some different numbering systems. We know the numbers from 1889, not 98. We have those numbers pretty well laid out. 1924 to 1927, we see a new numbering system over a period of time as steel underframes are put under the cars. So the car's renumbered when it gets a steel underframe. And then in 1958, after steel cars start arriving, most of the surviving wood cars get renumbered in a number block from 100 up. So freight cabooses, this is a 1943 caboose. Actually, that is the last caboose built by the Cotton Belt Railroad shops. And it survived to the end of operations. They have a body which is, they're not very standard, by the way. People seem to think they are a very common caboose. 28 to 32 foot body, more or less. 10 window cupola, one of the real standards. It's taller than many railroads use. The braces on it are a real common feature. But that's 3 windows forward, 3 windows rear, and 2 on each side. 2 or 3 windows ahead of the cupola. Now, some cars are 2 windows because they're shorter. Some cars are 2 windows on one side and 3 on the other because they don't have a window where the stove is. 1 window behind, but through 1930 or so, most of them had a side door. And if so, it was on the short end. And they went through a program to seal those up and put a window in. So the example, again, this has a steel underframe under it. We went the wrong one. Okay. You can kind of see some variations. It's hard to find pictures of wooden Cotton Belt cabooses. There just aren't that many of them. Both of these were wooden Cotton Belt cabooses. They're part of the group of 6 that went to the SP in 1955. Here we've got the earliest picture of one of the local cabooses. Actually, there's 3 in this picture. The one that you can see, of course, you can't see the underframe. The car ahead of it and another car in there are both local. The car on the very, very far right are local cabooses, because one of the things on a local caboose is the cupola is up against the end. Here's a close-up of that car. It's 49026 in the photo. It will become 2326. And in that is part of the story, because When you see these cabooses, like you saw in the collection of 4 of them, there were short cabooses and long cabooses. As built, they were all long. And in fact, this will become a short caboose. This will become 2326. So kind of looking at some of the variations on the freight cabooses, it's hard to find good photos. The upper one's very short. It's one of the ones that has 2 windows ahead of the cupola because it's short. Down below, if you look on the right edge, there's no end platform on that car. That's a muley car. There were, I think, 4 built. Some of them there was a plan for a steel underframe to go under the muley cars. It's not clear if when they got a steel underframe, they got platforms, but there was a plan for those cars. Local cabooses, again, we got these 2 styles. Up above, that's on, I think, the Waco branch, where it was one of the last uses, maybe the last use in Texas. Down below, 2334, was a long car. It has been shortened, and that shortening was a separate AFE. AFE is authorization for expenditures. It's a ICC accounting term. The railroad will have to account for every capital change it makes in a car because it can depreciate it. So it was one AFE to put a steel underframe under, and it was a different AFE to cut the car down to the shorter length. Of the 15 that were built originally, 4 rebuilt as long cars. 10 were rebuilt as short cars. 1 was scrapped before it was rebuilt. We haven't found that case yet. What makes it a local caboose and not a drover caboose? A drover caboose has things like bunk beds inside, really Spartan conditions. It looks like a bunkhouse. It's for cowboys. Cowboys who are going to be riding a train full of cattle, to unload the cattle, water the cattle, feed the cattle. These are walkover passenger seats. There's a salon in the corner that's short for bathroom in railroad terms. It does have what they call a dry hopper. It's a funnel that drops up onto the tracks. There is a heater for this compartment. There's a heater for the baggage compartment. You can just see in the corner, the conductor has a desk in there because he's going to sit in with the passengers. They can do his paperwork. But they were accommodations that would make sense to you if you had been riding in a passenger coach. This was not Spartan accommodations in a freight car. So looking at the literature of the Cotton Belt, and again, I'm a Westerner. I'm used to 6-volume sets about Southern Pacific passenger cars and 5-volume sets of freight cars and a separate volume for PFE refrigerator cars, and there isn't that much. There is a book that started as a 1939 thesis, master's thesis, that's been rewritten numerous times and is out there and available. There's several tables have them here today. There's Straypack's book about locomotives, which is the closest to what you see about other railroads where you can find books on cabooses. You know, there is a book on UP cabooses, a book on Burlington cabooses, a book on Southern Pacific cabooses. There was nothing on Cotton Belt cabooses. Passenger Trains of Texas has lots of pictures of the cabooses. By lots, I mean 5, which was probably the biggest source of photos. So, and the internet is a complete washout. I would just say it is not a source for information on these cars. Okay, we've got Southern Pacific freight cars on cabooses, which has nothing on the wooden cabooses, but we'll cover the steel cabooses beautifully because the Southern Pacific kept records of those. So, what there was, Ed Cooper passed on Joe Locke's caboose report. It's written about 1990. This gentleman went through equipment register cards at the museum in Thailand and proceeded to put together a series of emails on an email server about these cabooses. It's wonderful work. It is unbelievably helpful. Very few, I don't think there's 2 transcription errors I think I found in the entire thing, which is amazing. But at least somebody was trying to record core information about these cars. So I have access to the archive room at the Arkansas Railroad Museum. This picture only shows one of 3 shelves of cotton belt records. Makes it look much neater than it really is, because off on the side, every person who took Model Railroader or Trains magazine anywhere in central Arkansas donated their copies to us. And it's kind of amazing the floor hasn't collapsed yet under all that weight. But these are literally cotton belt records. There are registers of cars, there are records of stock, there is AFE books, there are engineering books, there are metal file cases full of records of passenger car purchases. One of them is probably 4 inches thick on just the 10 American Flyer passenger cars. So this is what I've been working with. I spend half my time cleaning the room and organizing the magazines, and the other half of the time noodling. And the noodling has yielded results. So what I've been able to do is tie together the history of how the Cotton Belt kept its railroad car records. Railroad means to me, nobody owns. So this book, Historical Record of Railroad, you have to love the name. They knew when they made it, it was old. There's 3 volumes, A, B, and C. They are 30 inches by 24 inches. They're fragile. That was the oldest record I can find of any of these cars is in volume B, and it's for the first cars built in Pine Bluff in 1911. And there is a page with the first few cars. So we have that record. They also show up, the second batch built in 11 to 14 is in volume C. Well, from that book, then I think this book was created at the moment the St. Louis Southwestern and St. Louis Southwestern of Texas were created as they went out of receivership as a record of their cars. You get to be 1915, the Interstate Commerce Commission is about to regulate railroads, and they take those 3 books and they consolidate them in 1 volume, and it is Returns to Valuation Order number 8. You now have 4 of the accounts by which ICC wants you to keep equipment. You can see roadway machines, steam locomotives, passenger train cars, and motor equipment of cars. There'll be different numbers for freight cars, for depots, for cattle pens, for pavement, at depots, for water lines. So this is how they want you to do it. And this book, I knew it had existed at one time. Last Saturday I found it in the piles of books. It's reported later as D8, and it's the record-keeping source going back to the original material that ICC accepted. I didn't take a picture of the pages last Saturday. Then from there, from that book, they created a register of equipment. There are registers of steel freight cars, there are registers of wood freight cars, there are registers of wood of work equipment, steel work equipment, passenger cars, locomotives. They're postbound. For each individual car, there's a page like this. This one is for caboose 49016 and whatever it becomes. And it's going to list the cost, and if we look in the second column, top line, VO8. That's where they got the cost for this car. It came out of volume 8 of the order. And they say this car costs $1,569.83. The ICC liked you to be exact. And then we've got extra charges for screens, a water cooler, a Joyce journal jack. So I believe that's for changing bad axle bearings. Steel underframe and platform, and it's listed on an AFE. 6532. Haven't found that AFE yet. We have AFE books. Ed one day was very pleased when we found the AFE for conversion to oil burning locomotives. First aid equipment. So we've got a capitalization of AFE brakes. Notice they just put it installed and they put a journal entry. They were getting sloppy. That should have been a full AFE. But then on the right is the depreciation of the car. As they get to a point where this car is worth nothing legally. So we found these. We found them for all but two of the cabooses. This happens to be for the car we have, 2325. So on it, we actually see reduced length under an AFE, halfway down. And then we see 3 steel platforms, because this is the first car, short car, to get a steel underframe, and they're trying to figure out how to do it. So they had a basic cost of doing it, and they said, we better add some steel. And they did that, and they charged off $4 to that, and then they have to be exact. That's a penny a month in depreciation. And then we're gonna have to go back and charge $32.61, and that's gonna be 11 cents a month in depreciation. The accountants are running the show, at least on this page. Again, first aid equipment, we've got a water cooler up above. We've got the AV brakes installed, and we can do it on a journal entry, not an AFE. Change in the railing in 1953, and again, the depreciation tells the car is worth nothing. So the thing about these sheets is these sheets are moved around. It's interesting, this one for our caboose is a register of steel freight cars. It was originally on a wood freight car sheet, and when they put the steel freight underframe, they transferred the information to a new sheet. If they retire the car, they move it to a book of retired equipment. They unbind the book, they take the pages out of the retired cars, they move them over to another volume. This sheet is found in one for box cars on the title, but it has lots of cabooses in it because they're not that worried about what the title is, they're worried about what's in it. We do have these sheets for all the early diesels through 1957 or so. So this is the system they're going to use. And at that point, I thought I was done, because in 1957, they're computerizing their records, and we don't have that magnetic tape or a way to read it if we did. But then last Saturday, I found these. And what these are literally computer printouts of whatever is in the computer. But of course, we're still paper guys in 1963. So we're going to print it all out and put it in a postbound book just so we can look at a piece of paper. Yeah. So here we find the last version I found, which is a 63, it's December of 63, with pencil markings and telling us what the status of some of the cars is. And there are still local cabooses in this. Up until then, we thought everything had been retired in 57 or 58. And they're still here on the roster, including the cabooses that are in that deadline in Rayburn, Arkansas. So this is a work in progress. We haven't really attacked freight cabooses yet, but the surviving cars have Murphy steel roofs. That is a wonderful thing. Murphy steel roof is a great car roof, and it doesn't leak. And as a result, these cars have held up pretty well. Have no idea when they were installed. From what I can do on Murphy research, the steel roofs were not available when the first of the local cabooses were built. They were available in 20 when our caboose was built. So we have no idea when those roofs went off. Cars would have operated under Jim Crow laws. There is no information on how that was done. There is no marks in the car, in the passenger compartment, to show any kind of marking. May have just been, you guys sit at that end, you guys sit at that end. But it is something we'd like to document. One of them is our car, 2325, is equipped with steel side frame, Bettendorf style cast frame trucks, dated 1937. Well, the car was built in 1920 and it got its steel underframe in 1927. It's got new steel trucks that were made after 37. There's no record of their installation. Another car in our collection, number 142, a basic freight caboose, also has the same trucks. So there was some kind of program of installing those trucks. We have not found it yet. It very well may have been at the end when the car was purchased for preservation. He said, I'd really like a set of those trucks under it. And they put them under our car. But it does have, we just don't know that. Other cars in photos have an Andrews truck that's a cast side frame with removable journal boxes, and at least one has arch bar trucks under it. So there was no standard truck, even though we keep finding the same truck under cabooses. And then installation of air brakes was not captured at the time, and it's put in a journal entry rather than as an AFE, which is strange. So little by little, we're trying to figure these cars out, and we have more questions, but we've been finding answers as recently as we do. So, kind of the last hurrah, 1962 photo, New Madrid, Missouri. That is one of the long cabooses. By our normal record keeping, we think this car was retired in 57. The locomotive is in SP gray and red. That makes the photo a pretty good date. It came out of a Trains magazine article from that year. So, yes, they're still being used. Are they still being used as passenger caboose? Not, maybe not, but kind of the last hurrah for these cars. So, kind of sources used, the Joe Locke Bruce reports, thanks to Ed. The equipment register cards, the drawing index cards, and this is, we have a significant collection, maybe even the majority of the cotton belt equipment drawings in the collection. They're disorganized, if not scrambled. What we also have is a set of 3x5 cards indexing what drawings are in the collection. Those, at least, are not scrambled. And going through that gave me dates and programs to do repairs and upgrades on the cabooses. The goal is, in the next couple of years, to be able, we've got a second drawing cabinet, second meaning the seventh drawing cabinet, to move in near the drawing collection and start to move drawings over so we can look at drawings and know that we've looked at them. But our file card indexes give us an idea of what we have, and there's two of them, one by subject and one by drawing number. The betterment files, the AFEs, we haven't found most of the caboose AFEs, we found them for the steam locomotives. The historical equipment register, that 1890-ish book, annual reports give us caboose counts. They say we have this many cabooses over the last year, 2 were wrecked, we sold 1, we built 4 and we bought 10. You know, and so we can combine that, and then from there you go to other sources like equipment, official equipment registers, or looking for articles in National Car Builder or the Railroad Gazette or Railway Age telling us that Cotton Belt ordered 10 cars from somebody. Thanks, Ed. You are a wonderful guy. You're almost as good as the drawing card files. Leslie Davis is the one from the museum who has spearheaded saving the car, pulling the cupola off, loading it, getting it to the museum, putting it back on, taking care of it. The Arkansas Railroad Museum in general for access to the archives. And I will say, we are at a point that if anybody is passionate about research and would like to visit, we'd be happy to work out visitation. It's still a mess. We still don't entirely know what we have, but we're getting to a point where we have a clean spot at a desk, and we'd be happy to go back and forth with you on what we know we have and look for what you want. Here's for preserving and donating the caboose to our organization. So with that, thank you, and I'd love to answer questions. Yes?
Where is the Arkansas Railroad Museum?
Pine Bluff. We're in the 1880s locomotive shop, which is primarily a back shop for maintenance, but is also where the railroad in 1943 built locomotive 819. It's a wonderful building, served by a transfer table that we have. Across the transfer table is the car shop where these cars were built. The building's gone. There's a wheel shop, which is abandoned on property, and then the railroad's yards are about a half mile down the tracks. Y'all have any? I'm gonna ask you his question first.
It's probably really the same question. Do you have any employee, Cotton Belt employee records?
So we have several different things, and we're starting to figure out how to manage them so we can answer questions. And lots of questions come in. Did you know my uncle Mississippi Mike or something? We have seniority rosters. But we have a seniority roster here. We find them in the files occasionally. They're not a pile of seniority rosters. And every craft, so there would be a seniority roster out of any operating location for engineers, firemen, brakemen, conductors. They're in the shops, there are different seniority rosters based upon your position. So if you are a carman, it's a different seniority roster than machines. We have a file cabinet that we recently donated, we believe is the Cotton Belt Federal Credit Union, which has lists of names. We found a couple names in there for people. So we are finding, one of the strange things is, when you retired from the Cotton Belt, if you were a well-liked employee, and I mean, it was a different railroad, it was not as corporate as many, they sometimes sent you your personnel file. And so we have somebody's personnel file with a letter in it from the yard master saying, I just thought you might want this. And so we have about 5 of those. We probably have more of those. So as we go through things, we're finding those pieces, those hints. And the goal is to probably create a database of names of known employees and where you can look for something on. Yeah?
Is there any indication of the paint colors on those solutions?
Okay, so I did some basic paint forensic work on our tools. It was always bright red. Even as far back as I could find original material on it, it appears to be bright red. They seem to go to an SP standard about 57 when they go to the big block letters, Cotton Belt. We have some lettering diagrams for the steel cars that we found in the file cabinet. So right now I can find business card, floor plans, and clearance documents, and I can find a few lettering things reliable. And I can find a whole bunch of things for 819 because those drawings were located during the rehab process, and we know where those are. But we're trying to get the rest of the stuff. It's really hard. You pick up a drawing, they're sometimes in bad shape. They have a number block, they tell you what they're supposed to be for. Sometimes it makes no sense, because some of the drawings would be a metal brace for the end beam of a boxcar between 2022 and 2044. You know, very minor parts of how to forge a handgraph. Tons and tons of drawings of locker rooms at various shop facilities or upgrading machine shops. So we're going through a lot of drawings, and I would guess we probably have 5,000 to 10,000 drawings, and absolutely unorganized.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna make sure that you two guys can appreciate.
I've got a million questions, I'm gonna come visit you.
Okay.
I own the Mound Depot and I own 2 producers, the 2305 and the 37.
Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah, we would love to, if
So
we'd
I've
love
got,
to.
like, paint color,
Yeah, and we've got the drawings for the big Cotton Belt area. They could be digitized and have stencils cut for.
Okay.
it's hanging on the wall somewhere,
Well,
that's why.
The depot is restored, as best I can tell, otherwise, but I'm trying to zero in on the proper red, or the proper color, if it's red or whatever it is on. Keep in mind, the 2305 was built in 1914,
Yeah,
and the 37 was built in 1963, it's kind of both things in perspective.
right, and they apparently use the same very bright red until SP enforced SP paint standards. But we're working on that. I haven't found the list of paint colors yet, but unfortunately, because they have, well, fortunately, they were allowed mechanical independence, so they're an interesting grill. Unfortunately, that means that all the information I know about SP paint doesn't work.
Well, I think Rayburn is particularly yellow instead of white.
Yeah, yes. Any other questions? Yes. Normally a roundhouse means a running repair for locomotives. So you'll see a rectangular building with locomotives getting running repairs as a roundhouse. But when you get to our facility, you're in a back shop where you're doing ICC class 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 repairs, which are a different class. And I think it's typically a back shop, not a roundhouse. And we did have in Pine Bluff a roundhouse adjacent to the locomotive shop, which is now a lumber yard.
I'm new to this, when I go up and down 45, I think they got cars there, in the museum right on the railroad, who's there, there are one, my house, another one up here, why is that local kind of, not really a museum or anything, and those in town, it's a who's they were.
Well, so, okay, for Cotton Belt or SP cabooses, the guy named David Corsica has a page where he has attempted to list every preserved caboose. And he keeps it up and maintains it, and it's worth looking on the internet for that information. So we know. Yeah. So you can, yes, it can be done,
Well, you know, if these have been, you know, if y'all, you know, knowing, I just think that, one thing, daycare,
yeah,
you know,
I call them feral cabooses, they're like feral cats. So for example, the question that there was a mention of, there might be one in Texas. And I recently, looking at some very recent Google Earth photos, found one that there's a funny, very long, skinny duck cabin with a coop on one extreme end. And I just have to think, that might be a long caboose.
Well, there's one of the short, long cabooses.
Yeah.
I once saw it listed for sale as part of a piece of real estate down in Matador.
Okay. So there's probably some in the wild we don't know about, but the ones that you see by the side of the road probably have been put into the database of where they are. One of the things we don't have, but we do have for many of the SP cars, SP will say who they sold them to, and a place they were sold, and we haven't found that record to talk about. So, thank you very much. There's two handouts. There's one on the cabooses with number and renumbering information and some of the dates that were changed. The other one is basically going through the car records, how we trace things from record 1 to record 2 to record 3 to record 4. And as I say, we would be happy to help anyone doing research. If it's a question, I'll go look and find it myself. If you really want to go through and try to find something serious, I may not have the time to go do 10 hours of research for you. Okay, thank you.
that's interesting, so this is fascinating in the evolution of those minerals was done to them. Not only taking a long bed, 15 cut and make a short bed, work out of it, and shorten the distance. All right, next presenter, you know, you've seen before, and he knows about as much about disaster. He's yeah, well, I wasn't, this time I wasn't thinking about Amtrak. But, we're on, Tony Wilson, is the Tyler Tap chapter of the Historical Society, and still lives on the old Tyler Tap line down in East Texas.
I'm a late arrival.
I think the worst thing about speaking publicly is having to talk into a microphone. They didn't have that, it wouldn't be so bad. Folks, it's good to see all of you again here at the symposium. It's always a pleasure to be among railroad people and those interested in railroads and its history, their history, and especially our Cotton Belt family that's here today. I wanted to start out by showing you a map so that as I go through the story of these events of a railroad tragedy, that you'll kind of have a visual picture for position and place. Folks, this is Google Earth, picture taken off Google Earth. It's a recent picture. The blue line is the Cotton Belt Main Line coming in. This is in northeast Tyler, Texas. I have a dash line here. It doesn't show up too good. There's a clearing among these buildings. These buildings are all still sitting there, amazingly, 54 years later after the wreck. And the dash line represents where the crew observed an approaching tank trailer truck approaching the crossing. This is Loop 323. This is east-west. There's north arrow up here. The red arrows show the truck route. The line crosses here, and any reference to Western Foundry is down in this quadrant. All of that space in 1970 was covered with part of Western Foundry, which was a foundry that manufactured pipe fittings, cast iron pipe fittings, mostly for water service. The date of the events that I'm going to describe here was June 25th, 1970. The Blue Street Merchandise was a high-speed Cotton Belt freight train that had left Pine Bluff early in the morning and was arriving in Texarkana. The Pine Bluff crew detrained at Texarkana for the crew change, where the Tyler crew would take it back into Tyler for the next leg of the journey. The crew that morning on the head end of the VSM was engineer Audrey Henley. The head brakeman was Gary McWhorter, and then there was a off-duty locomotive engineer that was riding back to Tyler named, Cecil Shirey. The, locomotive consist for the BSM was SP 9147 in the lead. Trailing was the Cottonbelt 8971, and then third engine running in reverse order was SP 4081. The BSM departed Texarkana at 8:42 that morning. Meanwhile, in Tyler, at the refinery, which is on the east side of Tyler, called La Gloria Refinery in those days, the truck loading facility was busy receiving tractor trailers, loading fuel, and checking them out, and then the trucks would go on their routes for the days for distribution of the fuel. A particular truck was Baird Petroleum of Paris, Texas, had come down that morning for his load. When he got his custody tickets and all his paperwork in order, he departed the loading facility there at the refinery and got on the loop to head back to the Paris area. When he pulled out, he had, by the way, his trailer was compartmentalized, meaning he could carry multiple fuels. He was carrying 4,074 gallons of diesel and 4,000 gallons 4,200 gallons of gasoline. As the BSM is approaching Tyler in a left-hand curve, right here, Engineer Henley and Brakeman McWhorter look through this gap in the buildings, and they only see it momentarily, but they do see a tanker truck approaching the grade crossing. As they get closer here, you can see there's some buildings right here up to the right of way. Those buildings obstruct their view till just before they get to the crossing. Those buildings are still standing there. As they get right to this point, the truck pulls out in front of them, and they both shout simultaneously, "Gas truck." Engineer Henley puts the train into emergency and starts blowing the emergency signal, which is a short blast on the whistle repeatedly. The truck clears the crossing, and then the lead locomotive strikes the trailer broadside. And that would be right at this point here. The locomotives proceed through a ball of fire that was described by witnesses as a mushroom-like cloud of flame, and accompanied by an earth-shaking explosion. It just shook everything around there. People all over town heard it. And the train proceeded through the fireball covered in fuel, meaning that it lit off too, so the whole train's on fire. And it proceeded across the crossing, and then after it got through the crossing, it began to derail. So most of the derailment occurred from here down to this area. Engineer Henley was found walking down the drainage ditch along the right-of-way along in this area, and a Western Foundry employee saw him over down the ditch, so he got through the fence and went down and got the engineer, who was, of course, dazed and stunned and in shock. And he took him back up the hill to the Western Foundry area and put him in a company truck, then drove to employee parking for the company and rushed him to the hospital in his personal car. Brakeman McWhorter was found about 200 feet beyond the wreckage, on his hands and knees, crawling away from the heat of the fire, and he was rushed by ambulance to the Tyler Hospital also. Engineer Shirey was found lying on the side of an overturned locomotive. I believe it was the 9147, the lead locomotive, and he was also rushed by ambulance to the hospital. Engineer Shirey became the first fatality of the tragedy, as he was pronounced DOA at the hospital. Friday afternoon, about 2:15 p.m., Brakeman McWhorter succumbed to his injuries and burns, and he also died. Engineer Henley was treated for severe burns on his face, hands, and arms, but he did survive, and after a hospital stay of 4 to 5 days, was released, of course, with many subsequent visits for his burns. The Bear truck driver, Robert Glenn Sullivan of Paris, Texas, survived the accident. When the train struck the trailer broadside, it dislodged the trailer from the tractor, and he simply continued westbound on Loop 323 and found an open lot here where they were doing some construction. There were piles of dirt, and he pulled to what he called a safe location. Texas DPS arrived on the scene, and the Department of Public Safety officers began to help in any way they could, mostly with investigation, because by then the EMS vehicles, fire departments, everybody had everything pretty well cordoned off to protect the public and control entry and all that. So the DPS officers began to ask questions for witnesses, and they found out that the truck driver was still on the site. So they went to find Mr. Sullivan, which they did, and interrogated him on site. According to the newspaper records, Mr. Sullivan reported to the DPS that he saw the lights flashing at the crossing. It was actively marked. It had a crossing flashers, lights on the mast pole with a cross buck on it, and also a boom out over the lanes with flashing lights as well. He said he saw it, knew the train was coming, and thought he could not stop, so he shifted to a lower gear to try to outrun the train. And so after the DPS got his answers to these questions, they went ahead and arrested him and took him to a justice of the peace that was readily available to post bond. And after they did get a bond letter from the JP, they took him to the Smith County Jail and had him, they arrested him and put him in the jail. So it's at this time that I need to note that in the state of Texas, it was by then a state law to stop vehicles, commercial vehicles hauling flammable and combustible materials. But I'm afraid to tell you that at the time in the 70s, it was loosely enforced. It's much more strict now. And it was incidences like this that caused that. But it was a law on the books. And indeed, the DPS officers, when they arrested him, the charge was negligent homicide. On July 7th, 11 days after the tragedy, the St. Louis Southwestern Railway went to court and filed a $1.2 million suit against the Bear Trucking Company and an investor in the company whose residence was in Austin, Texas, and then they also named as a co-defendant driver Sullivan. You know, during any of these type of things, the tremendous tragedy and terrible thing, there's always people who step up, and there were some numerous people, heroic actions, but I'd like to cite a couple of them. The gentleman that worked for Western Foundry, no one knew who it was that had gotten the engineer out of the ditch and got him to the hospital, and that remained unknown for a while until the Tyler Courier Times reporters found out who it was, and by then, engineer Henley had been released from the hospital and was at home recuperating. So he took the man to meet Mr. Henley, and his name was William F. Martin, and the gentleman had a real good visit, and of course it was very emotional. And Mr. Henley began to describe the trip from the wreck site to the hospital, and he said that Mr. Martin blew the horn constantly and had his lights on and was blinking his lights and stuff. And he said he also ran every red light that was against him on the way. And what's really funny is if you think about what Engineer Henley had just been through just a few days earlier, and he looked at that reporter and he said, and I told Mr. Martin, I said, you've got to slow down, we're going to have an accident. So even after what he'd been through, he was a good railroad man, he was still thinking safety first. So. Another guy I'd like to talk about, a number of people actually. Herman Jamison was a worker there at Western Foundry, and he and his two co-workers were working their normal duties, which included presence there along the fence line on the right of way. And I don't know exactly what they were doing, but that's where they were working when this happened. And they were made aware or alerted by the emergency whistle signal that Engineer Henley was blowing, and turned around and looked and saw the trailer in front of the train just as it hit it. So these are the guys that saw the explosion. And they immediately, as quick as they could, turned and ran away from the crossing. And Mr. Jamison was knocked down by the concussion of the explosion, and it propelled him on his stomach with his hands out in front of him on the pavement until he came to a vat they called the cooling vat, where cooling water that was used in the foundry process was put in this vat to take some of the heat out of it. And he went off in that water. Now, it wasn't scalding water, and he was glad to be in the water after what he just saw, but he was trying to climb out of it, and his hands were cut up pretty bad, so he's having trouble. When he peeks over the edge of it at the top of the paving, and some men that worked at the foundry had heard the explosion, ran out the building, and the first thing they saw was Mr. Jamison trying to get out. So these three guys, and I don't know their names, they ran towards him and got him out of the water. But all three of those men suffered a different kind of injury. They didn't have the burns that many of the people would expect. What they had was, and in the refineries, regrettably, I've not been in one, but I know a lot of men who've been in refineries where we had explosions. And what happens is the concussion of the rush of air away from the fire and the concussion of the explosion makes everything that's loose become a projectile. And it's like a shrapnel load coming through the air. So these three men had rocks in their back, they had sticks, any metal particulates, any kind of scrap that was loose in the ground, the explosion put in the air and injured these men in their back. So that was their main injury. But all three of them related that if the engineer had not blown that signal, they would never have turned around, because they worked 40 hours a week, hundreds of trains. They know they're by the railroad. They don't even look up. But when he did that, that's probably what saved their life, because they were able to get a head start and get going away from the train. Engineer Henley did recover, as I said before, and he returned to service. He bid off of the road jobs, and I was told about this when I was in college, that this engineer never went back on the road. That's kind of true, but he mostly worked the Tyler Yard switcher, and then he would occasionally go out on the local. We had a little day train called the Gilmer Dodgers, out and back local, and he would run it. I was told by some retired railroad men that knew Mr. Henry. And anyway, I want to, that's a brief overview of the day I'm describing here, but what I wanted to show you was the really great photographs that I've been able to get together and kind of show some more detail about this. First off, before I go to the first photos, though, I want to tell you that the first two photos are both taken by Tyler Courier-Times staff photographers. But they are from the collection of John Signor, who graciously allowed me to use these in an article that I published last year and in this presentation for y'all today. Okay, this is a photo taken not long after the wreck. We're looking more or less northeast. This would be a photograph taken by a very brave photographer, because he would come out of Tyler, or that's what Tyler Courier-Times office downtown. So he came out 271, and of course you could see where the wreck was from the fire. And then he walked, I'd say probably 100 feet, 200 feet to get this picture in front of it. I don't know if he used a telephoto or not, but you can imagine how hot it was standing there. This is, locomotive SP 9147 turned over here. I don't know if you can see it, but right there you can see cotton between the smoke. That is the cotton belt unit, and behind that is the other SP unit. This picture always reminds me of what a war zone must be looking like, and it was just, must have been a terrible sight to see. This aerial photograph is really, really interesting. It has a valuable resource for a lot of detail of this accident. This was taken by Tyler Career Times photographer. As I said, he went to Pounds Field, west of Tyler, and secured the services of a Civil Air Patrol pilot, and brought him in to town, and he got there are a number of these pictures. This is the best one, and this again is from John C. North's collection. I want to show you several significant things. Right here is the crossbuck and the boom on the crossing. The truck would have turned on the loop here and come this direction, so this is the signal that he saw working before he pulled out in front of the train. I also noted to y'all that the collision caused the trailer to detach from the tractor. That right there is the trailer. It melted in the road right there. Now, Mr. Jamison and the guys he was running with were down here, said there were pieces of that truck falling around them, pieces of tire and other parts of the trailer carriage. Yeah, it just made a sign, and he's right. That tank opened up and split like a melon and blew pieces of the tank out. So. You also remember me telling you that the driver continued down the loop and turned on 271. That's his trailer. He drove his tractor right here, turned on 271, and you see all these piles of dirt here. That right there is the the tractor. That's the Baird driver. That's where he parked the truck. Here you see the wreckage of the locomotives. You see how the derailment piled up into the Western Foundry property. So these men are up there working, they hear an explosion, and all of a sudden you've got this coming through your work area. Much of this stuff was on fire when it came through there. You can't tell it too well from the picture, but there was an auto rack or two fully loaded with brand new U.S. Postal Service delivery vehicles on the cars, and they got the crossing cleared out here pretty well. But the other thing I wanted to point out to you is the discoloration here. There's a flash line here from this explosion. And I know there's plenty of water and perhaps some foam on the pavement that's changed the color, but there's a darker color here and here that I suspect might be from the explosion itself. The reason I want to suppose that is that I happened to be visiting my grandparents in Tyler this weekend, that weekend, and my cousin had heard about it on the radio. He came to get me and take me down there to see it. And my dad went with us, and we parked on 271. We parked back here and walked down the shoulder and walked right down here to that point there at the crossing and looked back at the wreck. It was 3 hours after it happened, perhaps between 3 and 4 hours. The pavement, I was 14 years old and I was a feather light. And I could feel the pavement giving under me as I walked. That road had melted. And I think that may be part of the reason of the discoloration, but the road actually, it was like walking on sand almost, but it was an asphalt road. It had been decomposed by the heat. The other things I remember is the smell. A lot of different burning smells. Anything that burned was in the air. And so I smelled everything along the right of way was burnt. There was no grass, nothing alive along the side there. And the tires burning on the vehicles. I remember seeing all the little fires up in the railroad car, it was the tires on the mail trucks. The other thing, it's hard to describe, is just to see that train cars that large, not on the track, going down the track like they belong. It's very disconcerting feeling to see all the wreckage. Anyway, folks, go on to the next.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
Trains out on the track and the gas, what cost we rail?
I think Gary, you can vouch for me on this. I think it put it.
Up a little when you hit the trailer's probably recreation.
Okay,
If that plane gets up on the rail.
that's all it
Wheel
takes.
gets off, everything behind it.
Follows. Okay,
That could be what that.
yeah.
Like it stayed on the track, at least, 20, 30 yards, perhaps.
Yeah. I think it's what Gary said, it probably come up a little bit, he also he put it in emergency hard too, in a curve, so that, maybe that had something to do with it too, but, yeah. Okay, this picture is taken by Charles E. Harris of Longview, and, Chuck was a friend of mine. He went over, when he was still working at the, Eastman plant in Longview. He got off on Saturday and came over and watched them clean up the wreckage. It's kind of dimly lit, but the wrecker has got a hold of a set of diesel locomotive trucks. They're a 3-axle truck that they're fixing to put back on the track and reset something. The locomotive that you can see right here is the Cotton Belt 8971. And then work train is getting out there and working when they don't have traffic coming through. The line was actually cleared Friday morning after the derailment Thursday morning. So Saturday they're just coming in and out of the yard and doing some cleanup. Okay, this next picture is taken at Texarkana. The derailed locomotives in one car, an auto rack car, were all taken to Tyler Yard, and they remained there for a number of days until July 4th. A northbound manifest stopped at Tyler for crew change, and they put the wrecked cars on this train. This is the last unit of the northbound manifest. So the wrecked cars are right behind it, and then the rest of the train. This is the Southern Pacific 4081. After they arrived at Pine Bluff, they examined this engine and it was scrapped. And I think they had it shipped to St. Louis to one of their scrap yards up there. There's the SP 9147, and behind it the Cotton Belt 8971. Both of these engines ended up being restored later. This decision was made from California by the SP. The first one went to EMD without competitive bid. The second one, SP, I understand, wanted them to have a competitive bid. So the Sacramento shops bid on restoring it, and also EMD, and EMD still won. So EMD restored both of these engines. Now the Cotton Belt engine was an older model. And so while EMD had it, they upgraded all the electronics and they renumbered the 8971 to 9156, I believe. I kind of recropped this picture to show you the locomotive consist as it existed that morning. If you can imagine the 4180 would have been back here in reverse order. But this is the 9147 and the Cotton Belt engine behind it. And you get an idea of the damage caused by the derailment and the fire. That concludes my story about the DSM wreck at Tyler. I do these kind of stories just so that we don't forget the men who died within 2 miles of getting off their train and going to their homes. So I happened to be there, I never forgot it, and so I Hope you have found it informative and remember to be careful at railroad crossings.
The grade crossing, you said it had a boom, but you don't mean a gate, right? Yeah. And the truck driver said when he saw, he knew he couldn't stop, well, something was not jiving. I mean, I know you don't have an answer, but.
About what was the authorized speed for the wheels? That curve was. When you're clearing 40 or 100. Those hours, 2 miles. You get ready to slow down. But he only had what, a couple seconds, and he only had a couple seconds to get into the city.
Speak into the mic, please. I know you hate that thing.
I don't know if y'all can all hear what I said, but in 1970, the punishment for negligent homicide was considered a misdemeanor offense. And I can understand the difference between premeditation and negligence. I can understand the need for making that distinction, but to me, the end result is the same. Somebody's dead, you know. So I don't know what happened to him. I do know what happened to their patrol. They filed bankruptcy. And I'm sure they reorganized, but I don't know what happened to the driver. Yeah.
What speed does GPS determine the truck driver was going when he reached the brake line?
I don't know. He couldn't have been going very fast. Yeah. Well, that's a good question, because first of all, I didn't have access to that information about the report, but Engineer Henley told a reporter later that when they saw that truck coming between the gap in the buildings, it was his impression that the truck was slowing down, which would match what the truck driver told him. But again, you're driving a gasoline truck, looking at flashing lights at a railroad crossing, so why would you ever think that you need to speed up, you know? But I don't know what speed he was going.
Another question, how long did it take the cotton belt to clear that side?
They had it cleared by Friday morning, sometime before noon Friday morning, about a full 48 hours. They worked all night, of course, and President of the Cotton Belt at the time, Robert Nall, cited the Salvation Army, who set up a relief site there for the men, and they served them coffee, sandwiches, and donuts all night. So, yeah, they had it done in the morning. Yeah, that was just clear of the line. The derailment took quite a while to clean up. This picture here taken in Texas County is on July 4th. So we went from June 25th to July 4th, and that's when they moved the engines up there. Okay, folks, thank you for your attention.
Couple minutes here.
and about, if you have not signed in on the sign sheet, please do that, so we can get a good count of close here, and, get your contact information. If they don't have it, then make sure you get the email next time.
So Myron, when are you gonna present a motor car potpourri program?
Well, I ought to. I threatened,
That's good.
well, I threatened to bring my car.
Oh,
Somebody will probably.
or see it.
I don't think that.
Well, they had to get about 4 or 5 guys.
About 8 guys.
8 guys, okay. I mean, no. Keeping you up right now?
Probably would be my. Cutoff presentation, I've always wondered more about that.
You know as much as anybody on this planet knows about the cut off.
Go through the hay and
That's gonna get tired.
how much time to look.
I think that's all night driving season. So like, I just go up there and get a car. Go to the auction and pick up a car.
Not much ever.
Because I'm working on somebody's car.
Well, the SP still, or that UP still runs through there. Nothing left for the lady.
I was at the store, Johnson.
You know, it's curious. If you know there's a road from the data to about halfway, there's these green elements.
Car got five.
Not very common.
You had to go those out. They must have had rail service at one time. It just seemed like an odd place to. It's not on the main line, I mean, railroad.
Ready to argue and make it.
It's, well, no, that was always a work.
Same car, same car.
It's weird, as far as I know, it's still there.
You back this week? Put on I already got car at the house. But this way, I see a lot of state troopers on it. I like old historical films. My job is going to back to trap. I work at toy manufacturing, but they do a lot of photography. And then when we moved, like 30, 40 tripods was thrown away. I didn't realize it was thrown away until last day. I realized I kept on seeing sometimes, and they had a whole bunch of them saying, "They throw these 3 away." I looked at them, man, these are good tripods. Pick them all up and load them all up. I got 3 good tripods at the house. Let's go.
I don't do much anymore. Just tired.
My camera, I do a little photography here and there, but it ain't as much as I was at first. But I was telling the guy over here earlier, me and Kenji went out looking at trains in Nashville. We got home at 1 o'clock that morning after we filmed these trains and stuff, laid down 12 hours later. I'm looking at the Facebook feed. UP had a derailment in Abilene. Come look at the train, bro. I said, son, I mean, this is the train that we saw last night. It sounded like, no, Dad, I don't think that's the same train. I said, look at the car number. So we started looking at the car number, you know that exclusive pictures of the car number? And we played the video, and the last 28 cars on the train went on the number. And you know what I told kids? Because after that, a few days later, we was out riding around, you know, taking trains to Sulphur Springs that way, back before you get to Sulphur Springs, in the county. The road coming in and a blind curve coming up to the track. And we was out there, and it's dark. It's pitch black dark. And I told kids, I said, you know what? You're going to make it a habit not to get too close to these crosses. And he was like, Dad, why? I said, because now, there's been a whole rash of these train derailments, and I'm starting to think people putting them on the ground on purpose. Because they just had 3 of them in 3 days. UP had 2 or 3 of them on top of that. And then had one guy, they just, one rail fan, but he ain't no rail fan, I call him Terry. He decided to cut the lock off with a switch on the train, and the line the train up would go up on the side and hit a rail car, just to get it on camera.
All right, so already we'll get the last couple presentations here kicked off. If you're on any of the area rail groups, then I know you see this name on there a lot. And when you see that, when I see it, I know to look real close because there's going to be some good hard to find information. I don't know where Dennis digs this stuff up, but he follows every rabbit hole apparently to the very end. But he's found some fascinating information over the years, and occasionally he'll create got another installment of his 10 Texas teaser. So we've got number 4 in that sequence he's going to do for us today.
Thank you. Okay, turns out I am the warm-up act before the headliner starts the presentation by Professor Hook. Just to let you know, okay? I don't dance or sing or anything like that. But I do have this ongoing program called 10 Texas Teasers. This is the 4th one that I presented. Actually, the very first program that I presented here at the Continental Symposium. I think it was in 2018. Anyway, it's just a collection of kind of oddball Texas history facts and stuff. And there's more where that came from, so I'm not about to run out of material. All right, just a little bit of an intro slide since the symposium is here in Commerce. I showed this once before, I think the last Texas teaser that I did, just to kind of give you an idea of what Commerce used to look like at one time, at least the Cotton Belt Yard. All right, who remembers this train? Show of hands, who wrote it or saw it? Okay, very, very interesting operation, friends. It's too bad that it didn't last longer. This was a dinner train that operated out of San Antonio. Had some great equipment, passenger cars, the locomotives, the F units, I think it came from US Steel, someplace in Wyoming. It started up in summer of 1988, if I recall correctly. What you may not know is that originally the first, I don't know how long it operated this way, but originally it went from San Antonio to Sunset Depot down the sausage line, the San Antonio Valley and Gulf, okay, down to Pleasanton, and back. Then later on, I'm not sure exactly when, it changed over to the SP, went out to Hondo and back. When I rode it, it was, we rode to, we were supposed to go to Pleasanton, but somebody parked some cars in the siding that they were going to use for locomotives to run around the train. So we ended up going down to Campbell instead. So that was an extra benefit for those of us who like to, ride aerodynamic and so forth. Menu was pretty good, if I recall. I think eventually this was taken over by a California company called Francisco. They basically doing it. The paint schemes are this kind of ugly purple and whatnot. Yeah.
Did they also use those units to pull some special train to Dallas?
Yes, I'll talk.
Oh,
I brought that up. Thank you.
I didn't say a word.
Yeah. You're supposed to be my reminder. Okay. Yes, before it started the intertrain operation in 1988, summer, I think it was July or August, it ran a few special trips. This one was either earlier in 1988 or perhaps 1987. It ran from San Antonio to Austin. And that's, of course, you can recognize the Austin Depot there on the left. A friend of mine was able to ride this special run. And I think what you're referring to, Jimmy, is in 87, the same equipment. This is before the intertrain had started up. They ran a special train charter, Dallas to San Antonio. It's called the Papal Eagle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, Pope John Paul II was visiting San Antonio, and a priest who happened to be a rail fan got the idea to charter this train and sell tickets and bring folks down from Dallas to San Antonio. And that's what happened. It was called the Papal Eagle unofficially. Okay, if you have any traction fans in here, this is my token for you traction folks. Texas Electric Railway on the right, Houston and Texas Central on the left. And I'm pretty sure this is Rowlett Creek that it's going over. In fact, I found a postcard, exact same postcard, except it actually had Rowlett Creek printed on it. Okay. So, Rowlett Creek runs through it starts kind of in McKinney and Frisco down to Allen and Plano, and then eventually gets to Lake Ray Roberts somehow. No? Not Ray Roberts. Wrong relation. Ray Hubbard. I get all the Rays. Yeah. So, that bridge, the HETC bridge, is still there. You go on Google Satellite, or whatever, Google Aerial, you can kind of find it. It's much more overgrown with trees and stuff. The Texas Electric right away, I don't know if there's anything left of the, the supports or pillars for the bridge.
There used to be.
Used to be, okay.
This concrete pillar.
Yeah. DART owns this right now, the HETC right now. Alan Parks would like to get a hold of it and make a part of the hiking trip. But right now, DART owns the bridge right away. Here's an advertisement that you may not have seen. Santa Fe to Six Flags. Well, Santa Fe didn't actually go to Six Flags, but this was a promotion for one of their tour operations. Santa Fe went through Arlington, but I don't think they ever had to stop in Arlington. Is that right, Dr. Hook? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think it was their train to Chicagoland, Kansas City, and went from Fort Worth via the TNT over to Dallas. So, more than likely, they would probably, Santa Fe would bring you to Fort Worth or Dallas if they came, brought you in on the new line, the Texas Chief extension from Gainesville down to Dallas on the new line. And I'm sure you would just board a bus and take it to Six Flags. So this was never, of course, Six Flags was never, or let's put it this way, Santa Fe was never an official sponsor of the Six Flags Railroad, unlike Disneyland. Disneyland in California, they actually sponsored the railroad, the steam railroad, at that theme park. This is always a favorite line, Pecos River High Bridge. This is, of course, the second bridge over the Pecos. Bridge number, I call it bridge number 2, the Spindley Bridge, constructed in 1892. A couple of shots here that I've found. That shot on the left, the width of the bridge looks a lot wider than I would expect it. I guess maybe it's just the angle with the brave lady on top of it. The shot on the right is taken from a stereo card view. I'll only show one half of it. Shows a freight train going across the bridge. That was, of course, that bridge, of course, was replaced in 1944 during World War II. Engineered, or chief engineer was Harold McKenzie, of course. For those of you who are familiar with Cotton Belt. The legs, the masonry legs of this bridge right here still exist. They're down at the bottom of the Pecos River Canyon here. Yes, Gerald? I don't have a photo of the later version with me today.
Coming up on World War I, this bridge, because of all the equipment and rowboats and so forth that we had here, they strengthened this bridge. They put a third leg in between the existing legs there. They put a third leg, and they also went to a third beam underneath the rail. Or they tied to a third beam and strengthened that bridge. Yeah, that bridge is a lot longer than one. But what you have there, you always see two pairs of beams. Later, they're reversed after about 1920. And there's another vertical leg going down from actually three tiles, three steel tiles that we can There's a famous photo of the prosperity across the country. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Did you send that? Did you send that?
That was Robbie Peartree, sent it to both of us recently, and it showed, showing the prosperity procession across the very, very nice photo. I'll mention here very, very quickly, if you go back on my table back there, I have a big, large format USGS, that big, map fold out that has a picture not only of this bridge, but of its predecessor, the Pecos River Low Bridge, which was right at the mouth of where the Pecos River encounters the Rio Grande. Okay, so if you have time, you can take a look at it. That bridge, of course, was superseded by this one once this was built in 1892, and the footing of the supports for that first bridge are still there, only they're silted over. Pecos River, of course, is deposited a layer of silt that covers them up. They're out there, still there. And by the way, this bridge right here was built by the Phoenix Bridge Company. It was the firm that built this. The Lehigh University has an album, and they've digitized the photos of this album that document the construction of this bridge. So if you Google Lehigh University, Phoenix Bridge Company, you can find that album. It's very interesting to see how they constructed this bridge right here. All right, this is one of the probably all-time favorite themes of Texas Rail fans. If Skip Waters was here, we'd need a bucket and a mop to clean up after Mr. Sunbeam. One of the most remarked trains that ever ran in the state, especially in the Streamline era. My parents, in fact, returned from their honeymoon in Houston at the Shamrock Hilton. They went down to Shamrock Hilton, and they came back on this train. What do you find remarkable about these two timetables? Something I'm searching here for. What's remarkable about this? The one on the left versus the one on the right. Yeah, so the headline stuff is a little bit different. The color is different. One says daily nonstop. The other one says daily between Houston and Dallas. But what's really remarkable about it? Yeah. Okay. Different passenger traffic manager. Okay.
They're not on the main Sunset route.
No, but it was considered part of the Sunset route.
Yeah, by that.
Yeah. So it's.
No wheels under.
Oh, yeah, well, okay, that's good. It's a good spot. How does this thing operate? I'll give you a hint. Look at the dates of the two timetables. All right, so the train was inaugurated, I think, in fall of '37. Okay, so this one was published right afterwards.
Was it dieselized by 54?
Are you getting close? Getting warm. All right, February 21st, 1954, with a steam locomotive on the cover. Not even the Pacific lines were advertising steam on their literature in 1954. It was,
Been that way forever, so we'll just keep it.
yeah, let's keep that one, yeah. The 2024 timetable is just the same. Yeah, it is. It is. I don't doubt it. So, they dieselized this route, I think, around 51, maybe give or take a year. Okay, so they brought the Alco PAs in, I think, and they ran this route, at least on Sunday. But occasionally steam would still be used on the route. And in fact, those locomotives, those P14s, were temporarily reassigned to other responsibilities after the dieselizing. Okay, so you see pictures occasionally of one of these streamlined Pacifics in Shreveport and Austin, even on freight trains. But they were brought back in '53, at least for a while. What's interesting is that 652 was scrapped in December of '53. Okay, and here's the '54 timetable. The other two were sent to the scrapper in March of '54. So they were really getting it into the end of steam year, and yet they were advertising it on the 1954 timetable. So that's what I was hinting at to you about. That here we are in 1954, we're still showing steam locomotives that were first used in 1937 on Sunday.
Yeah, if I know that's what you're gonna use that pan for, I would have cleaned up there, go back to those.
You would have done what? I'm sorry.
I would have made it a little bit wider like the one on the left.
Okay.
That's the one
Well, you know,
that's what I worked on last week.
yeah, I think you did. My fault. Sorry.
You said it looked good, but.
Yeah, it looked good. Okay. I didn't know how it was going to look once you get it on the screen up here.
Moving right along.
Moving right along, yeah. So, 1954, steam on the on the, Sunbeam, wow. No, all right. Terrell Union Depot, here's a view you probably have never seen. Okay, you may have seen Terrell Union Depot on the other side, but not from this view. This is a kind of rare photograph. So we're looking from the north or northwest here at the depot. You've got this interchange track here. Okay, this is the Texas Midland right here. Later to go, it's taken over on the Southern Pacific. There's the interchange track, and of course the T&P runs from left to right. And somebody noted, I think it was Gerald Hook, that whoever parked this car here should get demerits. Would y'all agree? A little bit close to the Texas Midland. They fouled, yes, yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the control panel, control board for this interlocking is in the Tyler Cotton Belt Museum. Yeah, okay, yeah, you're the one that you discovered, yeah. Yeah, there must be a story there about how I got there, but, yeah, that's just kind of interesting oddity.
It's not on display, it's in there.
It's hidden in the back, okay, all right. Very good. Of course, this depot played an important role in World War II. You had English aviators come here for training at the local airfield. So some of the photos you see of this depot show British airmen, waiting at trackside, either detraining or about to board. Oh, yeah. So they, okay, that's a good point. All right. Okay, a little bit more tribute to the Gulf, Colorado and Santa Fe. Not the Gulf Coast of Santa Fe, which a lot of people probably. So this is an advertisement for a seaside special, actually leaving from Silsbee and Beaumont off to High Island. Take weekenders and vacationers to the Gulf Coast. You might note here that from Port Bolivar to Galveston was a railroad ferry. I would guess, well, it tells you right here. Date on this is 1925, so. Part two, this is another advertisement. I guess from Houston to Galveston to visit Galveston Coast. This is the old Union Depot in Galveston, not the one that's there today. That was built sometime in the 1930s. But note here that you have an actual covered train shed. This is one of two that I know of in the state of Texas, where you had two or more tracks actually covered by a train shed. And I'm not talking about an umbrella shed, I mean a big covered shed. The other one was in Houston, Grand Central Depot. Here we are in Dallas on Pacific Avenue. You wouldn't recognize it today, would you? You got light rail vehicles on Pacific Avenue. But before 1921, this is what it looked like. Two tracks, main line of the Texas Pacific went right through downtown on Pacific Avenue. A lot of uproar among the citizens and businessmen in Dallas about these trains that are running through their downtown area. They do. There's no auto traffic though. Part of it, but most of it is dedicated. Yeah, that was on a different side of downtown. No? Because the Texas. Okay. There were actually two depots on this line. There was a Union Depot probably at the end of the street here. That was a joint depot between Houston, Texas Central, and the Texas Pacific. The trains coming in from the east would stop there first, then they would come down here, and there was another, TP had its own depot, a little bit further down this way. And if you go downtown today, I think it's where Dark headquarters is, there's a plaque on the street that basically commemorates the TP depot. Oh, Crash and Crush? George Crush? Yeah. Okay.
He lives there.
Okay. Yeah, I knew he was from Dallas. I knew he was from Dallas.
Yeah, where he, where it talks about it.
Okay. In Dallas? Really? I'll be done. Okay.
You know, he didn't realize that what was on it blow open.
No, no. Okay, follow up on this slide with the next slide. Boom. All right, this is Pacific Avenue with a, somewhere in there is a T&P train, smoking it up. Again, you can see why businessmen and citizens of Dallas weren't particularly happy to have the T&P going down through downtown Pacific Avenue. I thought it was interesting to note that it looked like there's a boardwalk there for pedestrians. Yes, I have. Yeah, it is still there. It's underneath some condos or apartments. I tried to get a tour of that once. Talked to the managers. Didn't work out.
I walked down that tunnel one time, years ago.
Okay.
From the entrance, down the track.
Okay, so you actually saw the entrance. Okay. Was the smokeless cooker in operation then? Diesel, okay.
Not that old.
What do you think, Cindy? Stay out of this conversation. Okay, moving on here. Speaking of tunnels, here's one of 6, I'm gonna say 7 now, because I'm gonna include Dart's tunnel underneath Mockingbird Lane downtown. It is a railroad tunnel. All right, so one of 7 tunnels in the state of Texas. Fredericksburg Northern, here's what we call the approach. I'm not exactly sure where the tunnel is, whether it's down here or over here. There's a trestle here. Pardon? Down here somewhere, or in this direction? Okay. All right, wasn't quite sure. Here's a photo, I guess, of the construction, pretty rare. I don't know where that came from. Who took that or what? Who ended up with it? It is, that's right. It's now a fat reserve. Yes. By the way, don't ever try to go through one of these tunnels, even though it may open. There's bats in it. Bats have a nasty parasite that you can breathe in and can cause you problems. So they'll be up above you, raining down urine and whatever germs they have. You just look at the tunnel from the outside and don't go in. That's all I can say. Two more shots of the Fredericksburg Tunnel. One with the train coming out of it, and then one inside the tunnel looking out. Very quickly, the other tunnels. There's 2 along the Rio Grande, near Comstock, Texas, on the old line.
The old line.
The old line.
On the Rayburn.
Northern. Yeah. There was a town called Chispa that was on the Sunset, and it branched off to the short-lived coal mine that was there. And then there were 2 on the Fort Worth and Denver South Plains. one just today, that daylight the other one. And I think that's it, right? Am I missing one? And this one, of course, and then the dark one. I think that's,
Are you counting dark tunnel as one tunnel or two tunnels?
I counted one. Two?
Two holes.
Their water machine, they bore it through,
Yeah,
north and south.
yeah.
Pump out, they turn it around, get back to it, came back the other.
Oh, okay, all right, I was counting. All right, don't be picky.
Tunnels number 6, A and B.
Okay, Baird Hill. Some of you may have heard about the infamous Baird Hill, okay, which is out, oddly enough, near the town of Baird. This is along the Texas Pacific. These are old stereo view cards, that are not, of course, the best contrast and color and so forth, but here you've got a train coming across a bridge, and then through a cut here, and on toward the town of Baird. And here's another, oops. Another picture showing TMP train taking us through the cut. Okay, so the question has come up, where is this Baird Hill exactly? What is it? Okay, and there's a lot of misinformation about it. Okay, yeah, it's around Baird, Texas, but as it turns out, and I have this on Baird Authority, and some of you who get the Railroad and Locomotive Historical Society bulletin board, put in a plug for that. Well, there was an article about this in a recent issue. So this is going from east to west. There's the town of Putnam here. Railroad comes along. Here you've got a lot of roads. You've got the old US 80, I think, which is the Bankhead Highway. All right, right here, both the highway and the railroad take a bend. That elevated piece of land right there is actually called Baird Hill. But Baird Hill in railroad terminology is the long grade all the way from Putnam through Baird, and of course there's another section up here that's not on the map, as you can see from I-20 today. The railroad comes out and makes a curve, you can see the trains going around the curve. So almost to Clyde. So Baird Hill includes the grade from Putnam all the way to almost to Clyde. And of course, I think it was a 1.3% grade, maybe not so great in comparison to other grades in the United States. But when we have a fully loaded TNP freight train, that was a tough climb. And so they would put on helpers in Baird at the yard to get it up the rest of the grade. And the helper locomotives had boosters on, steam boosters. By the way, this is great. Okay, I think this one was considered. No, Ranger is further east. Yeah. And of course, after Clyde, you eventually get to Abilene. Here's another real cool oddity that many folks don't know about. Out in the Great Mono Estacado, where the Canadian River flows, was a bridge over the Canadian River. It was both a railroad bridge and a highway bridge. This is the Rock Island here. Rock Island had a line from Amarillo almost due north to Little, Kansas. And this bridge right here was to accommodate the trains and of course cars to cross the Canadian River. Today, of course, this bridge is gone. There's a pipeline that uses this right of way. And probably about 100 yards up this way is the dam for Meredith Lake Meredith, which of course was not dammed at the time this photo was taken. It'd be interesting to be able to read that sign left of the highway. 3 ton to Big Sandy. So, TMP trainer here on the left, and then a view of the depot somewhat modified, actually probably a previous version of the depot here, you have more of a porch area, which was typical of a lot of TMP depots. And by the way, I'm gonna put a notice in here. The North Texas chapter of NRHS is having a 24 hours at Big Sandy event. They've abandoned Saginaw because Saginaw is not cooperating anymore. They're having their second 24 hours at Big Sandy, September 16th and 17th. And on the 17th, Big Boy's coming through and having a service stop here in Big Sandy. So
I got no skip right here.
Oh, okay.
This is not public information, so keep this to yourself.
Okay, you can't leave this room and tell anybody else.
Big Boy will stop at 12:45 and remain in Big Sandy for 45 minutes, and it's exclusive because of the
Okay. 45 minutes, that's a good long time.
You didn't hear it from me.
You didn't hear from you. All right. The secretary will disavow the information that they gave me. So the word is that it's coming down the Cotton Belt, Texarkana, and maybe Pine Bluff, not the same day.
It's gonna run from Texarkana on the Pine Bluff sub to Mineola, and then, the stuff there.
Yeah, so you'll, from here, of course, it'll go on the TNP to Dallas. And there's some kind of special event with shippers, the next day or day following, I think that new yard, south of town, Hutchins, is a big UP facility down there. So even if you don't catch it at Big Sandy, you can still catch it in Mineola or Terrell or Mills Point
Or the following month.
or the following month. But I don't think it's coming back the same way. It's
Yeah,
coming
maybe
back-
it's there.
It's coming back through Fort Worth. And then, yeah, we're down in Houston eventually, and then, due north of Fort Worth, and then up there. Alright. So FYI, you put that in your calendar. All right, Jason, did you bring the basket of tomatoes?
So that's what you were eating out there.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, well, we've had a good warm up to the main event here.
We're on that. How about that? Okay. I've got this thing. Oh, I can't do all the same thing. Yeah. Yeah, I do. Ladies and gentlemen, introduce my sister, Cynthia DC. Let's see. There we go. All right, introduction to let's know about myself. Those of you who don't know me, my name is Gerald Hook. I now live in Russell, Arkansas. I'm native of Dallasite. I grew up in Arlington, graduated from Arlington High School 62 years ago. It's not long if you say it fast. And I always wanted a railroad. That's all I ever wanted to do in my life was to work for the railroad. Cynthia knows that. And I was fortunate. God blessed me. I hired out with the Kansas City Southern as chief clerk in Dallas, in the Dallas sales office on January the 5th, 1970. And 3.5 years later, I was promoted to sales representative in Minneapolis. And as I told
Mike mentioned a little earlier, you'll never learn to appreciate 30 above zero until you feel 30 below zero. So 3 winters in Minneapolis, and then I was offered, called me one morning, and, it was Sunday, January 2nd, 1976, we had 2 inches of snow in Minneapolis. Following morning, they called me Monday morning, about 10 o'clock in the morning, he said, we'd like to offer you, if you're interested, offer you an assistant sales manager in Houston. Do you need to talk? Why don't you go ahead and talk to Connie and let me know? I said, don't worry about it, we're going. Because I didn't even ask how much it was going to pay, because we were leaving one of the highest state income tax states. We were back to Texas with no income tax, state income tax. So I knew we were going to get a nice raise. 10 years in Houston, and in 1986, I was, in September 86, I was promoted to sales manager at Baton Rouge. And we moved to Baton Rouge, and we spent 14 years there. I actually left KCS in the middle of, in July of 98, primarily because I wasn't really happy with Mr. Mike. Mike Haverty. I wasn't real happy with some of the things he was doing, and it looked like the handwriting on the wall. It might not keep some of us old people around anymore. And at that time, most of my value of my retirement account was in KCS stock. Now, had I kept my KCS stock, I'd have been a millionaire, easily. But this is right after the Enron debacle, and I figured, if I would get a bunch of stock, if it were at that time worth a couple $100,000, I'm not going to sit on KCS stock, but diversify, which I did. So anyway, not a millionaire. Retired, I tried to leave KCS, and left KCS, tried to retire in 98. I went to my wife at that time. Connie was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Somebody had to go back to work. You know who it was. And I happened to know Bill Robbins, who owned the Darnell Russell Railroad. He was up there one time, and he was talking about it. I said, hey, you needed marketing help? He said, sure, you move yourself up here, I'll tell us payroll, pay your health insurance. Sold. So we moved to Russellville. So as I said, told me many times, I said I retired in Russellville. Left the railroading, fully retired in 17 years ago, in 2007. I'm writing a book on Kansas City Southern, and I've been asked several times what contributed to the success of KCS, why the KCS was built and so forth. So I've been doing a lot of research on this thing. I thought I could knock this, I've been working on this book now for about 14 or 15 years, and I'll show you some reasons why it's taken so long. But I want to go back and find out more about the history of KCS. So I've been going back to newspapers.com. And we're going to have to go back to Kansas City and look at Kansas City. This Kansas City, of course, is where we started, Kansas City Southern Railroad. So this is what we have in Kansas City. Kansas City is about geology, about geography, geology, and opportunity. This is the Missouri River. And if you'll notice, coming out of St. Louis, going upstream, as Lewis and Clark did in 1904 through 1908, came back the same way. You leave Kansas City and going virtually due west. Yeah, it kind of meanders about, but going due west. So you get to Kansas City, and it makes a right turn if you're going north, if you're going upstream, and heads on up toward Canada. So this was geography. And what's important about this geography is Kansas City then, Kansas City puts you as close as you could get to the middle part of the United States. Remember, at that time, it was the rivers were the arteries of commerce. And there were no railroads out here until about, well, let's see, first one to get across northern Missouri was the Hannibal St. Joe, and it got into Hannibal, from Hannibal on the Mississippi River to St. Joe on the Missouri River in 1958, I believe it was. That was the first one. And then, at least to that, down lower. And then from Kansas City, the Pacific Railroad of Missouri, which later became Missouri Pacific, broke ground in St. Louis in 1851. It took them 14 years to get to Kansas City. Part of that, of course, was because of the Civil War, a lot of it because they didn't have any money. So it was 1864, just after the Civil War, when they finally got into Kansas City. So That was the geography part. So the American Midwest is just one big prairie, right? Wrong. There's a special collection, there's very special collections in the Kansas City Public Library, and I was up there a couple of months ago, and I was talking to a young lady there, and I said, look for some stuff about the geology in the area. She pointed me out to pointed this book to me. I don't have a copy of it, I'm trying to get a copy of this book. But she made some slides for me out of it, she did some scanning for me. And this Dr. Richard Gentile, he was professor emeritus at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, retired in 1999, passed away in 2022. But he did a great job. This is some of the stuff he had done. This is a artwork of a rendition of a Missouri River riverboat at Kansas City, and it is at the, then the Kansas City Wharf, which is, you can see, is just a shelf. And you see there's all hills up there. All these hills. This is Kansas City, all the hills. The doctor did all this geology work here, and he is showing in this particular drawing he did, the red here, there's the Missouri River coming down here, again, going west, going east. Kansas River comes in here to the confluence, the way it goes. And in this area where you have the red, it says that the deposits are 50, 60 feet to 100 feet high. This is from the Pleistocene, I hope you pronounce it right, deposits from the last glaciers, which was probably about 11,000 years ago. And glaciers, of course, like a balloon, just pushing all this stuff ahead of it. And so that's why the Missouri River comes out and it does, and it makes an abrupt right turn, if you're going downstream, and heads east. So all this in here was this high ground. Now, what's the next? I'm using newspapers.com as a lot of my research material. Found this was published in January of 1850. This is the first story, serialized story, went on for about 12 weeks in these newspapers. I like this map, it's very simple, it just shows the Missouri River, here's the Kansas River coming here, and they call it the call, coming in here. They didn't really give a date for this time period here, but it shows over here, this is called Wayne City, and it's on the river, it's about 13 to 15 river miles above this the confluence. The early traders that were bringing trade goods in to go west would unload off the riverboats here, and it talks about having a little real mule pull train here into Independence. Kansas City really didn't exist at the time. Independence was there. So they came in there. Later on, this guy, Choteau, Pierre Choteau, he was obviously a French trader, because Louisiana had territory had been French. He had a trading post established here in 1826. It didn't stay there very long. As you can see, this one says 1831, because the Missouri River had a big flood and everything went down the river went. So he would then move his trading post out here a couple of miles on a little bit higher ground. Later, about a little bit later on, the town of Kansas was established at this point. And this is about where that riverboat had been sitting there in that drawing. This was called the town of Kansas. The town of Kansas was then later became the city of Kansas in 1850. So this is the 100th anniversary. 1850 was when the city of Kansas City was established. And then they had this little road that came up here to Westport. Westport is the part of Kansas City. I've been there several times. But this is the jumping off point for the Santa Fe Trail and the Oregon, California Trail. We're at this location. So here we have the Santa Fe Trail. This is the reason why you have the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe. And Santa Fe, New Mexico, at that time was part of the Republic of Mexico. And at that time, Santa Fe was a port of entry for Mexico. This is where the Mexican customs agents were located. This is where you would pay your customs fees, and this is where you then, as it were, interchanged or sold your goods to Mexico through Santa Fe. The route that was usually used was this northern route because there was a lot more water available and more grass available there. Of course, you did have to go over this thing called Raton Pass, or well, it was about 800 miles. Basically, that's the same route Santa Fe built themselves originally. Then they came along later on, this was a shortcut, this was called the Lower Road. Essentially the way the Rock Island went later on, of course Rock Island went this way, but this was kind of the same way they went. This area out here that says Oklahoma at the time was called No Man's Land. And it was called No Man's Land for a very good reason, because it was very difficult territory. So anyway, that's the reason why they came to Kansas City, and then they went down this direction. Chose this map here. Again, this is these are the maps and stuff I find in these newspapers. This is stuff you don't find this stuff on eBay. This is not Rand McNally. These are made by the newspaper. This is 1877. And I choose this because I want to show you some features. The railroad lines, the railroads and so forth, were built in here in the low drainage areas for the rivers. This is where the area is pretty flat out through here, so you go ahead, that's a good place to build a railroad. You don't want to build a railroad, you couldn't build a railroad through there, it's all hills, all mountains, all hills. This is the Hannibal Bridge. It was opened in 1869, the Kansas City Hannibal and St. Joe, which then the Hannibal and St. Joe Bar, which then became part of Oregon and so forth. But anyway, that's the Hannibal Bridge. The Missouri Pacific was coming in this way, came in this direction. And the city of Kansas City, by this time it's called City of Kansas City, gave them an ordinance and allowed them to have an easement right along the levee here to get down into Union Station, get out into this area. The stations, there was a station here at the end of the bridge, right here by the bridge. Then there was State Line Station out here at the state line, which is right there. State Line Station, and that was the Kansas Pacific. That's Kansas Pacific going out there, that was their station. Missouri Pacific had their own little station up in here, but to interchange these other guys and all this stuff, that'd be over here. So they had to go along the river. Well, boys and girls, this is what they ran into. Remember I showed you all that high ground in there, the loess and so forth? Oh, this is what was pushed forward by the glaciers. This was hand dug. All the way through there was hand dug. This particular picture was a collision, and you can see the locomotive is down on its nose there. So there goes the work to try to get the engine back. They've already removed the tender and everything behind it. But this is taken by a photographer, got up there and got this photograph. This is from the Special Collections Department, Collections Center, Missouri Valley Collections. Basically the same location, look at the other direction. No, that's not tunnel, that's just some stuff under. But they had this is all hand dug. This house is up on top of that. All hand dug. Wyandotte Street is Wyandotte to North-South Street here in Kansas City. This is taken instead from the levee, I'm supposed to run out the levee. This is 3rd Street, and it's facing north, 3rd Street. It's hard to see, but the little level spot there, that was the Missouri River. And there's a van walking. You had some natural drainage that had occurred over after the last ice age. And so you had a natural drainage there. And then they would put some little primitive roads along there to get down to the river. This is how they cut down the hills. Maybe it's difficult to see, but you have a bunch of wheelbarrows that are standing there vertically, a bunch of people standing around here. This is probably the mayor or somebody, I don't know who that would be, a nice, pretty carriage like that. These guys are sitting on a ramp. And so they would bring a wagon, a mule drawn or a horse-drawn wagon to come up here and stop. These guys would come along with a wheelbarrow and dump the dirt into the wagon, and the wagon hauled off. Look at how these guys are on these tiers up here. They're hand cutting all this stuff. Houses left up on a top. Look, I looked at this thing, and I saw these pictures, I said, you had to be kidding me. But that's what they did. If the whole area between the river and the downtown area of Kansas City, it took about 30 years to cut all that stuff down. For Delaware again, now this is a little bit later on, it says 1868, I really don't think that's correct, I think maybe a little bit later than that. But this is Delaware Street, we know we're looking south because we're looking uphill. How do you like that house? Now, these people didn't cut it down, this house was torn down. Somebody came along and decided, well, I'm gonna build an office building here or something like this, and they buy the land, and then this is torn down, and all this is cut down, and away we go. That's what you need. All right. Kansas City grew, I can't believe how fast the city of Kansas City grew. In 1838, when they incorporated the town of Kansas, I say incorporated, so loosely, use that term loosely, about 300 people. 1840, 700 people. 1855, we only have 1850, but 1855, 300 people. And this is after a cholera epidemic. 5 years later, 4,400 people in 5 years. Go from 300 to 4,400 in 5 years. 1865, now this is right after the Civil War, that's estimated about 5,000 people. 5 years later, look at that number. Is that incredible or what? 5 years later. Union Depot opened in 1878. I put that in for a reason, you'll see that. 1880, we're at 55,000 people. 1886, Union Depot's at capacity now, maximum capacity. 1890, 132,000 people. That was Kansas City. Speaking of Union Depot, here it is. Now, we're standing, the photographer here is standing on the bluffs. This is the 9th Street, what's called the 9th Street Incline. There's Union Depot there. There were only 6 tracks. They're completely hemmed in. They could not expand that depot. There are tracks along in here. This is some tracks here that are owned by the Hannibal and St. Joe, and Hannibal and St. Joe. Union Depot tried to buy those tracks. Hannibal and St. Joe said, no thank you, we won't sell. So they were hemmed in. By 1886, by 1886, they were already trying to figure out where to put the new station. They didn't get the new station built, which was the station that's there today, and they didn't get it built until 1914. So I'm going to show this again. This is a map. This came out of the Kansas City Star, 1887. This is actually an advertisement for a realty company. Had this map. I love this particular map. Here's Hannibal Bridge. This is where the head bridge station was there. 1887. So Union Station is right in here. This is some of that traffic that was owned by the Hannibal St. Joe. Stockyards are here. This is State Line Station here on the Kansas Pacific going that direction. There wouldn't be a place to expand. I'm going to shift gears now. I'm going to talk about Arthur Stillwell. Okay, pick on Arthur Stillwell. This is his book. Actually, it was not his book. He published his autobiography, and it was called I Had a Hunch. And it was published in 6 installments in Saturday Evening Post, starting right around Thanksgiving of 1926, ran through the Christmas holidays. The last installment was the last issue in January 1927. The Port Arthur Historical Society, a fellow named Dow Wynn, who was the director of Port Arthur back in the late 60s and early 70s, Port Arthur Historical Society was able to get special permission from Curtis Publishing to republish this story in hardback form. So this is a book that I have, of course. So I want to point out here that Arthur Stillwell's autobiography, which was written, I'd say 1927, he actually wrote it earlier than that. He died in 1928. It is the only published history that I know of the early Kansas City Southern. One. You talk about, oh, there's not very many cotton belt books, KCS had even fewer. The next thing that I know was published was Dr. Keith Bryant's book, Arthur Stillwell, his biography of Arthur Stillwell in 1971. Then we had Rail South, it was published by this guy, written by this guy, Womack, in Beaver, Oklahoma, I believe, 1977. Caleb and Lynch and their picture book, excellent picture book, out of Southernville, 1887. And then San Angelo, Dream of Steam, this is about Stillwell, and the Orient, published in 2023. Also, we have internally, we've had a typewritten, I think it's about 14, 15 pages, called The Saga of the Kansas City Southern Lines. We believe it was originally written sometime around the late 1940s, early 50s, did some changes and added additions and so forth to it. But every one of these things basically repeated Stillwell's history. Now, I'm getting ready to do this book on KCS, and I said, you know, is all that right? I still don't know whether there's enough. I want to point out something here. This is from Stillwell's book, and it said, when at 27 years of age, I hit out for the Middle West, and on my mission to form forming a trust company, and through it building a great railroad, and nothing more tangible than the purpose. You know, I want to do this thing, blah, 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 blah. So I was 27 years old, of age. He was born October 21st, 1859, died in 1928, 27 years old. Well, you take his birthday, 1859, you add 27 years to it, you get what? 1886. Everybody that's written anything about this railroad, early history, says that Stillwell went to the Midwest, Kansas City, in 1886. So I thought, okay, let's see what else we can find about it. So I go to newspapers.com, and I start looking. Now, if you ever do newspapers.com or Portal of Texas History, any of those other things, you start looking, you put in search words. I tried Arthur Stillwell. I finally got smart, so let's just make it A Stillwell. And finally I thought, well, I've seen it misspelled a few times, so I put Stillwell. Look what popped up. January 20th, 1886, Meridian, Connecticut. And it says he is the state agent. He was the state agent for Travelers Insurance Company. He was state agent for Connecticut and Rhode Island at that time. And so he was in Meridian. He's going to be there for several weeks, a few weeks it says, working, getting business. Oops, sorry about that. That, ladies and gentlemen, was the only thing I found with Arthur Stillwell's name in 1886. That's it. So I keep looking. So I thought, let's try 1887. First thing 1887 is this thing. June 25th, 1887, A.E. Stillwell of Hartford, Connecticut, is registered at the Hotel Brunswick. One of the, somebody pointed out earlier, one of the things that these old newspapers did, these guys used to go around and have a city reporter. He'd go to the various hotels. Anybody here that I'm interested, checked in last night. Well, anybody want to register? And he'd look, okay, go. And they go back and put something in. So here it was, he was in Kansas City in June. Next thing I find is in August, Beatrice, Nebraska. Well, now he's from the home office of Travelers, and he's coming with the state agent from Omaha, and they're going to be there for a few days, but he's still working for the insurance company in 1887. He didn't go there in 86. The next thing I find, he's down the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, September, just a couple, 6 weeks, 2 weeks later, and he and his wife from Hartford, Connecticut, are at the Southern Hotel. Okay. Next thing I find, 6 days later, the Kansas City Star, where Stillwell and all these people have formed Missouri, Kansas, and Texas Real Estate Trust Company. How many of you think Missouri, Kansas, Texas Real Estate Trust Company was part of the Katy Railroad? Anybody think so? Anybody want to stick their hand up? It was not. Good guess. But several days later, then this comes up in Topeka Daily Capital, and this is the Kansas charter was issued. They were charters issued in Missouri, there were charters issued in Iowa. They operate in Iowa, Missouri, Nebraska. They tried to operate in Minnesota and Illinois, and they didn't have too much success. This is what he did. He formed this trust company, and they decided to build homes, build houses. Back in the day, the only person who would get a loan or could do someplace was the husband. Was the husband. And if he died before the mortgage was paid, the lender would repossess the house and kick the family out on the street. So what he did is these were 10-year mortgages. They would loan to you for 10 years. And included with this was mortgage insurance. Now, my sister's been in the insurance business for 50 years, so I better say this correctly, or should, yeah. My sister's been in the business for half a century. I'll get my butt kicked for that one for sure, right? Yeah, there you go. So this is what he did. Now you can see down here it says capital was $500,000. If I back up, it says 500. This one says capitalization of $350,000. What was happening here? Go back to this one. Go back to this one here. This guy had got all these people. These are people, a lot of these people with whom he had been dealing with the insurance business. And people on the East Coast, especially when you talk about in Connecticut, all these areas, these were financiers from the insurance business. And in the 1880s, when you talk about investing in Kansas City, a lot of them were still thinking about cowboys and history, about Indians. I mean, this is just 20 years after the end of the Civil War. There was a lot of strife in Kansas City and between the North and South, the rebels and the Union people. And why would you invest in the Middle West? So what he was doing here with homes is he was then, we're going to be selling homes to people. How are people going to buy houses? Well, they had to have jobs, they had to have money. There was money available. He started attracting these people. So that $500,000. So here we are in 1888. Here's a nice big ad here from the Kansas City Times about we're doing all this stuff. And some of the people he has listed here, he keeps getting more and more people getting involved. The following year, 1889, this is from the Omaha World Herald. A friend of mine always called it Old Weird Herald. 1889. Now look at it, $1 million. A few years later, this company had capitalization of $5 billion. And they moved from building homes to bringing in industry into Kansas City. And this is one of the pegs, this is one of the legs of the foundations of the Kansas City Southern Railroad. January 6th, 1887. Another belt line is projected. And this is the beginning of the Kansas City Southern. The incorporators were Ed Martin, E.L. Martin, former mayor, E.L. Moore, B.K. Moore, Sam Scott, Tom Boleen, Stumpf, George McClellan, Theodore Peltzer, and this guy, John Beebe, and then Felton Leavenworth. These guys then decided to put together a new belt railroad. And the reason for the new belt railroad, they wanted to build a railroad. The reason they wanted to build it was the tremendous growth. We already know that the newspapers were reporting that Union Depot can't handle any more traffic. They got to find another depot spot. With the tremendous growth in the public and the population, you had to bring in food. The main thing you had to bring in was coal. Coal was the fuel of choice in those days. And coal had, there was very little coal in the Kansas City area at that time. They really never mined a whole lot of it. Couldn't mine it in the city. But the coal was being brought in. And you had to have tracks to bring, you had to have a place to unload the coal. You had to have tracks, you had to have more station space, you had to have more roundhouse, people space. Here's the problem with Kansas City. What you see here, this is high ground. This is bluffs all around it. So this is all high ground. This is high ground. This is the Kansas River. So it's low ground. And you have bluffs. This is Turkey Creek drainage. So you have this is bluffs on both sides. This down here was Rush Creek. And down in this area, you had drainage, and you had, but around is bluffs. So the only area that was still available that had not been taken was this place up in here. This was overflow. The Missouri would flood that quite frequently. So what was going on is the Corps of Engineers, at that time, what do you call Corps of Engineers, but the military, the War Department, was putting in revetments along the rivers here to hold the banks, to try to keep the river, corralled as best it could. So they started putting in the levees in here, building levees up. Remember, we're having all this dirt removed? Well, what are you gonna do with the dirt? Well, how about taking it up there? That's what they did. They hauled the dirt up there. You know, bring it up for free, drop it here. And that's what they did. Go back a bit. I found this map, 1892, Kansas City exact. Now, I'm not very good at computers, but my son and my younger son in Springdale, Arkansas, is really good. So I took this thing, and I took then some Mark's Law, and I mapped out, and I said, okay, this is kind of the colors I want you to use, and I want you, can you do this on the computer? Can you give me these colors on the computer? And it came back about an hour later, looking like this. So I'm going to show you a bit about the railroad. This is the Kansas City Suburban Belt Railroad and the Kansas City and Independence Airline. Kansas City Suburban Belt Railroad was chartered, and the Missouri charter was January 8, 1887. It took 3 years to get it built. The main reason it took 3 years, they had a lot of static Missouri Civic up in here, but the main reason was getting all this crap cut down here. So that they bought the land, and they had all the land owned, but it was high ground, and they had to get it cut down. So that's what they did. That's the whole line right there. It was chartered, it was a Missouri charter, to start at this location and go this way, and down around this way, down the Blue River drainage, and then up the Brush Creek drainage to the Kansas state line. This was opened up in 1891. They started right here. Milepost 0, drove a stake in the ground. They go out here and build 5 miles out here to the Milwaukee connection, made a connection at Milwaukee, turn around and build 5 miles back down this way. Ladies and gentlemen, this railroad was originally built from the very first stake, right there, double track. I don't know of another railroad in the United States, other than maybe interurbans and streetcars, but there's Class 1 steam railroad that started out as a double track railroad. And that's what these guys did. So that's the first 5 miles. Long thing. Give you an idea what the terrain, T-R-R-A-I-N, looked like. This is the suburban belt, double track suburban belt. The station's back down that direction, so we're looking west along the river, double track. This is the Missouri Civic. At this point, they had 3 tracks. You had to go across. The ocean was 4. There were actually 5 tracks they had to cross. Go across here, First Street, and then the Chicago and Alton, the CNA, which later became Illinois Central, which now is KCS, was over in this area, and they had to cross all that. Look at this here. Look at the houses still sitting up on top of the hills. This is all gone now. But that's what these guys had to cut through. Showed the bottom half of the suburban belt. It came around here. There's Leeds. This is where the KCS goes now. This shows Kansas. This is Kansas City, KCNS, and a lot of part of that later became part of the Frisco. This we had trackage rides on there from this point here. We had trackage rides down to Grandview. They had a coal mine back in here that operated for a while. Of course, it's gone. And this track in here, although it was authorized, was never built. This is then the continuation of that line that they thought were gonna build, but it was not chartered. And then, of course, that was never built either. Kansas City and Independence Airline, this is kind of interesting. In reading Stillwell's book, it's about 11, it was what, 5.5 miles. And this portion of here was fairly straight. Then they get into here and it was, you don't see it here, but it had something to 16 curves in it. And the engineer came in, he brought it, and put it on the desk and showed whatever, and somebody said, that's the crookedest railroad I ever saw. And Stillwell says, okay, we'll call it the Independence Airline. Actually, part of this is still in existence. This is a Sugar Creek going up through here. And right here, if you ever go in that area, or go ride Amtrak up through there, was a refining store. The KCS had a little branch line that went up in here, as far as industries and so that is still in captivity. Now, they want to go over to the Kansas side. So they got a charter for the charter railroad in Kansas, and all of a sudden it dawned on, we can't connect to it. So they had to go out and get another railroad started, a charter railroad called Consolidated Terminal. This one was another one that was a real tricky operation, and in the book they talk about, we had problems getting over there, they had to build. I believe that the bridge that they built, they call it the high ground here, this is low ground, the bridge they built right over here over this tracks is the same two spans that are down on the north side of Union Station. Haverty had those bridges moved, but they're not. So this portion is gone. But the KCS still does get over to the other side. It's called Union Terminal Railway of Kansas. It chartered in December 1891. Did get it built for almost 4 years, 5.16 miles, 1.18 miles. I want to point out this little piece here was a bridge across the Kansas River down here. They built a bridge over the Kansas River here. The bridge is still standing, but the approaches and so forth gone. A lot of this track is still in use, and KCS had some trackage rights to get over there. This thing was going over here to Argentine, and they actually approached the Katy River about building from Paola up to the Jackson County line. And these people, our people, are going to build from here down the Jackson County line and connect with Katy and give them a new entrance into Kansas City. And give them a larger area, provide a larger area that they could purchase to build a larger yard. They never did do that. All right, part 3. Now we're going to go here to the book, to talk about the book. If you were here last year, you can see this lady. Her name is Karen Mills. This is the Sevier County Museum in DeQueen, Arkansas. This is what was the inspiration for me. The kickstart, I had to do something, and this is these 6 photo albums. Very vanilla, nondescript photo album, nothing on it, nothing special about it, except the first, I opened with the first page, this is the first photograph I saw. And if you know anything about KCS, this is in Eve, Missouri. That's the Katy Railroad going over the top. At Eve, Missouri, milepost 99. The whole thing was done by this man, Jan DeQueen, for whom DeQueen, Arkansas is named. He was probably about 25 years old when this was taken. He was a rich coffee merchant. He married into a good, rich family. He ended up having a coffee plantation in the Dutch East Indies and became very wealthy. January 29th, 1927, he and his son, this is the old man that's there, of course, is with his wife, Flonina, and John Arthur, his son, or no Arthur still lived, no John spelled in English, and his wife, Flonina. This is taken up there at the family home in Arnhem. That is the family home in Arnhem. This picture came to me from a friend in Holland, and I'll introduce you Holland. Beautiful mansion he had there. When the Nazis came to power, and then the Nazis were threatening war, of course, did then attack Holland on September 1st, 1937, I believe it was. These people, the son especially, because he was only 30 years old, was was pretty much, well, by that time it was in his early 40s, but they had money, and they didn't want to be around with the Nazis. They knew the Nazis would probably overrun Holland, which they did. And so they sold their land here, they sold their property to the city of Arnhem. After they left, the city of Arnhem then let the German High Command have that building, and they operated out of that. During Operation Market Garden, which was written up as a bridge in a book called Bridge Too Far, the movie Bridge Too Far, this place was destroyed. It was destroyed, but when the family took off to France to set out the war, they obviously took those albums with them. That was family heirlooms. Otherwise, we wouldn't have today. So here's Stillwell and his son John Arthur. They're just getting ready to leave. In all these photo albums, on each page, there are one or two of these 3x5 file cards dated, giving you some information about what they were doing. As you can see, it ain't written in English, it's in Dutch, and written longhand. So I figured, well, I can learn something here. So I go and I start buying Dutch English dictionaries. It took me about, I don't know, a couple of months, and I finally, a couple of months, quit with that. And I finally figured out the first two words here, were purple sunrise. And I saw that, I thought, what in the hell is this guy doing? And I figured he'd be telling me something about what they were doing, purple sunrise, give me a break. So, I've been a member of the RLHS for quite some time. And so I talked to Bob Holzweiss, who's the president of the organization. He's the deputy director of the George H.W. Bush Library down at Texas A&M. And I said, do we have anybody in Holland? Do we have any members in Holland? And so he sends a note to the membership secretary. She goes back, she said, yeah, we have one guy in Holland, and his name is Augustus Wiedendahl. And here's his email address. Well, I'd heard about this guy. And he wrote this book called Slow Train to Paradise. It's how the Dutch investment helped build the American railroads. So I bought the book. He's available. Is it in English? Yep. $15. Thank you very much. I get it. Chapter 14 is Kansas City Southern. It talks about Mr. Queen in Kansas City Southern. So I take these, I send him a message. I write this book, blah, blah, blah. Can you help translate this stuff for me? So I sent this to him. First one sent, and there it was. He comes back. Breakfast I ate breakfast for 4. And the driver that they had, because they had a chauffeur and all that stuff, you're lucky you don't have to go to sea today. And he was talking about the storms that were in the North Atlantic at that time. So they said they leave Arnhem because the tide and so on and so on. They go over to the coast and they board this little vessel called the SS Mecklenburg, and this was then operated between England and the continent. This ship, this is 1927, this is a postcard they had. That ship stayed around until 1954 before it started broken up. They get to London and spend about 4 or 5 nights in London, board another train, go down to Southampton, they board this ship, the White Star Line Olympic. Olympic, as I said, was a sister ship to the Titanic. They crossed the Atlantic, and they had a lot of storms in the Atlantic. Their ship was 1 day late getting to New York because of all the storms. There was a German vessel was 3 days late getting to New York because of all the storms. This is a picture taken by John Arthur. John Arthur, the son, took all these photographs. I don't think the old man took a single one of them. The son took all. And he had an excellent camera because everything is sharp as a tack. This is a picture taken of New York with all the fog. Isn't that lovely? Postcard of New York, they captured postcards, we took photographs, timetables, brochures, all sorts of stuff. The tall building there is the New York Times building. Didn't know that. From New York, they traveled down, they spent about a week in New York, then they traveled down on the Orange Blossom Special down to West Palm Beach, Florida. Spent several days at this hotel called the Hotel Alba. which the way they were not impressed with the hotel, and I don't know why, but they didn't seem to like it. The old man was doing some riding around on these, as they call it, three-wheel contraption, and John and Arthur loved to do fishing, so he did, looks like he did pretty well there during the time they were there. They left West Palm on the Florida East Coast up to Jacksonville. I would drive Jacksonville about 7 p.m., 3 hour layover, then come out on the Seminole up to Birmingham on the Seminole. Now he talks about it was a nice ride until they got on the Central Georgia, and said the roughest track he'd ever been on. Then from Birmingham, spent a couple of nights there, then got on the Florida, Kansas City, Florida special on the Frisco and come on into Kansas City. The tickets they had that they had in the scrapbooks as well, their full albums. And this is full album as well, with again, a postcard for the Frisco. So now we're in Kansas City, more of the postcards here. AS&B Bridge. Put this one in here, the Hotel Mule Block. And the reason for the Mule Block is, I want to point out there in the lower floor, right there used to be a men's shop in there called the Haberdashery. It was owned and operated by one Harry Truman. The Haberdashery is, last time I was in the Mule, which was 20-something years ago, was the lounge, was the bar there, and of course it's still called the Haberdashery. The Kansas City Club, spent a lot of time here. They put us up at Kansas City Club. The fifth floor here was the game room. They had game tables, they had pool tables and so forth. The guest rooms in here, the 12th floor up in here was a ballroom and a restaurant. I enjoyed it. I liked being there. A lot of guys, it's an old mausoleum, I don't like this place. This is, this building was built by Arthur Stillwell and his gang in about 1895 or 6. And it became the headquarters for the Kansas, Missouri, Kansas, Texas Trust, and then later on the Kansas City, Pittsburgh Golf and so forth. Their offices are in here. This building and the one next to it are gone today. This building down here is still staying. This is all flat parking lot today, unfortunately. I have seen that building, but did I stop, take a picture of it? No, but that's smart. The building here is near and dear to my heart. This is 114 West 11th Street, the Kansas City Southern's headquarters. The fourth floor here was the marketing department. The fifth floor was IT, was the computer guys, all that stuff. 7 was the executive floor. 8th floor had been an executive floor. They had some meeting rooms and so forth up there. But I spent many hours there over my 25 and a half years in Kansas City. So, and there's the old man staying in front of the entrance there at 114 West 11th Street. So now we're getting ready to go on a little trip. This won't take much longer. This is their big postcard for Kansas City Union Station. This day was in their scrapbooks, in their co-album, so we know this is pre-1927. This is the lobby. I chose this because the lobby is pretty much the same as it had been. Only the clock you see there has been moved. It no longer hangs there. The clock is now down at ground level in a glass case. When they were coming, everybody knew that Mr. DeQueen was coming. He was pretty famous in that area, well known. And the KCS took this car, KCS office car number 100. This was originally Arthur Stillwell's car. They'd had it for a while after Stillwell lost the railroad and it became Kansas City Southern. They kept the car for a few years. They sold it. It was gone for about 8 or 10 years. They bought it back. And it had been, I think it was used by maybe some of the minor officials and all that. Knowing that he was Stillwell was coming, I know that Mr. DeQueen was coming, they took this car into the shop and they put the steel underframe under it. Prior to that, it had been truss rods. They put the steel underframe, lift the body, put a steel underframe under it, length of the leak 4 feet, sticking on the inside, and they made this car available to Mr. DeQueen and his son for a week. They left Kansas City on train number 1, the Texas Express. This is about a year, this is March 1927. This is about 15 months before the inauguration of the Flying Crow. So they left, they left Kansas City at 2 p.m. on down to Grandview, and obviously they were told the train crew had written orders that said, whatever these guys want to do, do it. So they stopped there for a few minutes. The sun gets out, takes pictures of the train and the depot. The depot is still in captivity. It was moved from its site here about a mile to the east into the city park. So it's still there, and it is now the Grandview's Historical Society. That's it. Engine number 809 of 11 Pacifics they owned. These were built by Alco. And so it was on heading up that train. This following morning, Pittsburgh, Kansas, and you can see the car. I look at that picture, like I almost smell the paint on there. It's so fresh. The old man is standing here. I know who the other three men are. I just know which one is which yet. But I've got to try to figure that out. Now, from Pittsburgh, they got into 2 automobiles and they went on an auto tour, all day long auto tour in that area because of all the industry that's there. Tremendous amount of industry. In around 1900, Pittsburgh, Kansas had 104 coal mines. And all that coal was shipped by what? Rail. KCS got a lot of it, Missouri Civic got some of it, Frisco got some of it, but it all went out by rail. This is the next morning. We're in Neosho, Missouri, so the car is spotted over here on this track. We spent the night in the car there. Here's a curved icing stage, the water tank. I don't remember what that building is. I need to look that up, and I'll put that in the book. There's the depot there, and there's a train there, locomotive there. That is probably train number 3. There's a passenger train. It should be train number 3, which was due out of Neosho about 6:05 a.m. This being early March, this is March 7th or 8th. This being early March, it is not 6 o'clock in the morning. So the train had to be probably an hour or so late. The sun on, the kid got a picture of this. Included this just to show you that it was a 2-car private train. The old passenger coach here was probably nothing more than for brakes for the train, or train brakes. This is Rich Mountain. This is Rich Mountain Station. Of course, it's long gone. Used to have a station sign there that said Rich Mountain, and something hit it. I think it was a track machine or something. I think hit it, and so the sign was gone too. March 10th, 1927. They, of course, came in that day. They just would go touring all the locations up and down the railroad. The city fathers decided to put on a banquet for Mr. McQueen. He was returning to the city for the first time, and it's our first time in many, many years. He finally had come back. And this the Queen Depot, of course, is gone. Hotel Luton is gone. This building back here, that 2-story building back there, is still standing. And on that little, right there, it says rooms. Today it's a ghost sign. It's still there and still says rooms. So I knew I was going to try to get this book written, and I looked at this picture. I'm like, geez, that could be a perfect cover shot. But the problem is, it's a horizontal format. So I run into John Winfield, the artist there from Fort Worth. He was at one of the Plano train shows, and so I showed this picture. I said, John, can you do paint this for my cover for my book? Oh yeah. I said, well, what we need to do is move the depot closer to the old man. It's kind of moving about in here, be my it's kind of exploded. Can you do it? Oh, yeah, I can do that. I said, I release the room, it's off for the book's title, and there's something about it here for my name. And, oh, okay, yeah, I can do that. So about 2 months later, I get this, emails this to me. And I looked at that and I thought, that is exactly what I wanted. If I'd have been an artist, that's what I'd have done. And he did it. Now, I simply took that and I photoshopped, I put the name of my book in black ink and the name of my own name in white ink at the bottom. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's the end of the program. Of question I'm asked all the time is, when the book coming out? And the answer is, God only knows, I don't know. I am now ready to start writing. I now have enough background information to understand why the railroad was built, who built it, why it was built, when it was built, and all the reasons for that stuff. I have come up with so many surprises along the way. But at any rate, I appreciate your patience and sticking around with me. I'll be happy to answer any question. If any question, I'll take them. If you don't have any questions, you want to go, so I understand that. Dr. Davis, thank you very much.
How far south of the photo?
They go all the way to Port Arthur. Port Arthur. There's probably, I've not counted the number of photographs that I'll include, but I'm gonna say somewhere between 150 and 200 photographs that I'll include. And then as I go along, in each place, I'm gonna have some information about each place, some historic information about each location. Neosho. The portion from Neosho, Missouri, went between Joplin, Neosho, and on down toward Sulphur Springs, Arkansas. And Neosho was actually started by a full-blood Wyandotte Indian by the name of Matthias Splitwalk. And there have been some things written about it. In fact, one of the book was just written, unfortunately, and I hate to let the guy down, but this last book was written by Bill Gallagher. Said in there that Matthias Splitwalk built this railroad and it was laid atop logs without any spikes or something like that. I mean, it's ridiculous the way he wrote it. This guy did build this railroad, got this railroad started. He ran into a lot of financial problems that were not his own making. And he ended up having to sell the railroad, which he did. But Matthias Splitwalk. I got a hold of the Wyandotte, went to online to find the Wyandotte Nation is at Wyandotte, Oklahoma, which is only about 20 miles or so west of Neosho. So I called it one day and I started talking about it. Well, you need to talk to this young lady, and I talked to her and said, oh, you need to talk to this other guy. So he gets on the phone and I said, well, I want to come by and see you folks talking about this all. And he said, well, you really need to talk to this lady down in, who lives around here, Nancy Brown. Let me tell you, she is the family historian for the Splitwalk family. And he said he also want to talk to Jane May. Jane May is a great granddaughter of the old man, of the Indian, Matthias. So I talked to Jane May. Jane May is 88 years old. I talked to her. She's down in Ardmore, Oklahoma. Shark attack. And I said, oh, I'll send you some stuff. Well, that's great. She said, I gotta leave the morning, so I gotta go up to see my dentist, my eye doctor. And she said, my eye doctor's in Oklahoma City. I said, well, you gonna take the train or? No, so I'll drive up there. 88 years old, she's driving herself. Good Lord. Anyway, so I had a really nice meeting with those folks, and they are interested in what I've come up with. I've got a lot more things I need to do, but anyway, that's the program. Anybody else? If not, Dr. Davis. I am going to have, I hope in the August issue of Bulletin Board, which is the chapters newsletter from our LHS chapter newsletter. I hope to have an opening chapter, opening stuff about the book. Basically what I've told you here. But it's going to be about Kansas City, about how it laid out and how all this came about. And I'll have some dates and that sort of thing. I'm now to the point where Ray's starting to that. So, how long it's gonna take, I don't know, But at some point, I'll get a loan, I'll say, okay, I gotta get going, so. Okay. Anybody else? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe, we appreciate it. I'd like to very well wraps up the program. I want to acknowledge a couple of folks. Gentleman on the video camera back here is Sawyer Angus. He's our archivist here at the university, and he's up on the fourth floor or so. And he's been doing that for the archives. First of all, I appreciate always their support. They helped us start this back from the beginning, and they keep doing that. We appreciate them. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank my wife Jennifer. She had to today sign in, and she tolerates me doing this every year. I appreciate it for that. So thanks to the sponsors, staff here at the Student Center for preparing a good room for us, and Dexo for preparing a pretty good meal, I thought. Mark, August 2nd, first Saturday of August in 2025 for the 19th annual. We'll try to do it again if all works as we hope. Thank you so much for coming. Guys, hopefully you're going to see you.